Chapter 361. Master of Forging 3. The in-charge forced a smile. She only forged one finished weapon today, but the skills she displayed are no worse than mine. I wonder who her master is. Perhaps only a Grand Master is able to teach such a genius. The elderly's eyes deepened at the words. Everyone thinks that the level of one's martial skills will enable them to attain a different status. However, regardless of forging or refining pills, one would not have any other concerns if they reached the level of a Grand Master, as powerful figures would offer their services to obtain the items they produced. I wonder how Yi Qingtang's cultivation is currently. If there's nothing outstanding, she could focus on forging armaments. With her talent, it is not impossible to reach the level of a Grand Master, the in-charge mumbled. In this world, it was extremely rare for people to reach the state of a Grand Master, and only a few were successful in the past 1,000 years. And those few people had average cultivations, but any random divine weapons they produced could attract a group of people offering their services. No matter how powerful the mighty figures were, they would still seek an exceedingly strong weapon. And thus, Grand Masters were people who they had to treat politely the most. It seems that I need to make a trip to the Inner Sex Elders' Hall. The elderly rubbed his beard as he thought. If Yi Qingtang really had the ability to become a Grand Master of forging, she would no longer be as simple as an ordinary disciple to Xianling's sect. If Xianling's sect could raise a Grand Master, it would have an exceptional significance. At that thought, the elderly did not stay any longer in the Sword Spirit Workshop, and left immediately. Yi Qingtang, who exited the Sword Spirit Workshop, did not realize how lucky she was today as she joyously hugged her demonic blood sword and dagger, all the way back to her residence. In the yard, Fei Ying was cleaning up the fallen leaves, and immediately greeted Yi Qingtang when he saw her. "Are you in a very good mood today, miss?" Fei Ying blinked at Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang chuckled and nodded. Suddenly recalling something, she opened her space ring, and took some items out. "Tell Inai Shang to come here." Fei Ying nodded, and immediately called for Inai Shang. When Yi Qingtang saw the two young teens standing before her, she finally placed the items that she just took out into their hands. No matter what your identities are currently, according to your talents, you will not remain here forever, as long as you cultivate diligently from now on. Yi Qingtang handed Fei Ying and Inai Shang two basic cultivation techniques which, although were not considered rare, were the most suitable for their age. Only by laying a strong foundation from young would there be better effects in one's cultivation in the future. Apart from cultivation techniques, Yi Qingtang also handed them a few bottles of She Spirit pills. These were all exchanged when she was in the outer sect. Now that she had the soul condensation pills after entering the inner sect, the She Spirit pills were naturally no longer suitable for her. Disbelief filled the eyes of the two kids, as they looked at the pile of items in their hands. The identity of a sword boy or attendant girl was equivalent to that of servants in the inner sect. To guard against their sword boy and attendant girl from developing, many disciples never allowed them to have too much contact with things related to martial skills, much less take the initiative to give them cultivation techniques and elixirs. "Miss, we cannot accept these items." Inai Shang frantically shook her head and returned the items to Yi Qingtang. Fei Ying similarly was overwhelmed by this unexpected favor and was a little frightened. Chapter 362, Mission 1. Yi Qingtang would never treat the people around her poorly. After entering the inner sect in her previous life, the sword boy and attendant girl appointed to her treated her pretty well, and that was a slight portion of warmth she received in the sect. However, those two kids were probably not yet 10 right now, and had not been selected by the sect. She was not powerful enough in her previous life, and could not do anything for them. Meeting Fei Ying and Inai Shang this time was considered a kind of fate. In her previous life, Fei Ying was able to become an official inner sect disciple through his own talent, and what she did merely won her a favor. Rather, it was Inai Shang. She had never heard anything about Inai Shang in her previous life, but she could tell that Inai Shang's talent was not any lower than Fei Ying's from these few days. Yet somehow, she did not manage to become an official disciple in her previous life. The two kids still wanted to reject the gifts, but were forced to accept them by Yi Qingtang. With a pile of items in their hands, Fei Yingyan and Aishang were both surprised and delighted. They thanked her continuously and engraved this precious favor of hers in their hearts. It was really their blessing to be able to meet such a nice person like Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang waved a hand for them to continue with their work. There was not much work in the courtyard on usual days, and the two kids were idle most of the time. As a sword boy, Fei Ying could exchange a few moves with Yi Qingtang. However, Yi Qingtang's method of cultivation was not similar to that of normal people. Thus, she rarely allowed Fei Ying to practice with her. Rather than letting the two of them waste their time, allowing them to cultivate and improve their skills in their spare time was much better. With a weapon she adored, Yi Qingtang would naturally not neglect her cultivation. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Apart from giving the two kids some guidance in their cultivation, most of her time was spent on upgrading herself. The spirit energy in the inner sect was much richer than the outer sect, and this was more nourishing for Yi Qingtang's spirit root. After entering the inner sect for a month, new disciples were required to begin accepting sect missions. However, before that, Yi Qingtang had already accepted 2 rewarded missions by herself and earned quite a lot of Xianming points, which she used to cultivate in the Spirit Consonance River. It was a coincidence that her first sect-appointed mission was actually together with the Blood Moon Sect Elder. When the Blood Moon Sect Elder saw Yi Qingtang, there was a subtle change in his expression, and it was not as resistant as before. Some outer sect disciples have not returned from their sect mission within the stipulated timing. The sect wants me to take a look. Yi Qingtang looked at the mission scroll, and when she thought of the word disappearance, her eyes fell on the Blood Moon Sect Elder. The mass disappearance of disciples from different sects was mostly related to the Blood Moon Sect's resurrection. However, the disappearance situation stopped afterward. Now that there was another disappearance case 2 months later, Yi Qingtang could not help but suspect whether it was related to the Blood Moon Sect. The Blood Moon Sect Elder was rather annoyed by Yi Qingtang's stare. "Don't look at me. I've always been in Xianling's sect during this period of time, and even if a disciple did disappear, it has nothing to do with me. Even if he wanted to, there was no opportunity. Moreover, with Yi Qingtang's threat and temptation using the source of the marrow pill and bonded soul pill, how would he act recklessly under her watch? I know it's not you. I'm just asking if you have any clues," Yi Qingtang said. The Blood Moon Sect Elder replied, "How would I have any clues? Everyone from the Blood Moon Sect had their souls sealed back then, and most of them were scattered everywhere. How would I be able to know anything?" Yi Qingtang was troubled over the matter as well, and was more vigilant. If this incident was really related to the Blood Moon Sect, there was nothing bad about the Blood Moon Sect Elder following along. Chapter 363, Mission 2. This time, Yi Qingtang's mission location was at the Floating Light Canyon, which was some distance away from Xianling Sect. Traveling to and fro would take at least 1 month. After making some preparations, the two of them set off immediately. In the Floating Light Canyon, a few figures shuffled through the dense forest in a panic. They were dressed in the Xianling Sect's outer sect uniform, but at that instant, these sect disciples no longer had the arrogance and distinguished air around them as before, with dirt and wounds covering their bodies. The Wind Sword Sect people probably would not be able to catch up so quickly. "Let's take a rest for now." A Xianling Sect disciple panted. The dirt on his face could not cover his pale complexion. The other people slowly stopped after hearing that, and they panted with an ugly expression. The 7 people were all Xianling Sect's outer sect disciples, and had received a sect mission a month before. After heading to the Floating Light Canyon, the entire mission was completed relatively successfully. However, no one had expected that they would actually encounter an accident when they were about to return. A pale Suwan was in the team as well. She pursed her lips lightly and looked towards Lu Xiuwen, who was frowning and breathing unsteadily. "Senior brother Lu, will the people from the Wind Sword Sect still chase after us?" Lu Xiuwen's expression was very ugly at that moment. This was the first sect mission he accepted after recovering from the injury, yet unexpectedly, he was met with such a setback. Then, Lu Xiuwen did not reply to Suwan, and rather looked at another disciple in the team. That disciple was tall and handsome, but his expression was extremely ugly at that instant with wounds all over his body. It could be said that his injuries were the most severe amongst the 7 of them. Xiaomo, this incident started because of you. With things as such, shouldn't you give us an explanation? Lu Xiaowen threw his words coldly. His voice attracted the attention of other people in the team. The reason for having to go in hiding in the floating light canyon so miserably was something done by that disciple called Xiaomo. Junior brother Lu. This was just an accident. Junior brother Qiao did not wish for this either. Don't say any more already. What is most important right now is to flee from this place. A disciple mediated. Lu Xiaowen scoffed as he looked at the pale Xiaomo accident. If he did not offend the Wind Sword sect disciples for nothing, why would they attack us? Furthermore, it was originally their own business, but he did not know what was good for him, and had to join in. Now that he stirred up such a huge matter, why do we have to suffer together with him? Lu Xiaowen's words were relatively harsh, and Xiaomo's expression turned even uglier. The Wind Sword sect, and they usually stayed out of each other's way. Nothing happened initially when they met, but Xiaomo happened to see his fiancée in the group of Wind Sword sect disciples. As the two groups passed by each other, he caught sight of the young lady joking with a Wind Sword sect disciple flirtatiously, which infuriated him immediately. He reasoned with them, but both parties were angered as they argued, and ended up in a physical brawl. The number of Wind Sword sect disciples was double of theirs, and when they fought, the 7 people from Xianling sect naturally were not the Wind Sword sect's opponents. In the end, the Xianling sect disciples were still unable to escape after being cornered in the floating light canyon by the Wind Sword sect disciples for days. Chapter 364, Mission 3. You don't have the skills, but you still stirred up these troubles. Xiaomo, if you are a man, you should answer for your own acts and admit your mistakes to the Wind Sword sect people. Don't implicate us. Lu Xiaowen's brows were tightly furrowed as displeasure filled him. Xiaomo hung his head low. He was the most severely injured, and was extremely vexed over implicating his fellow senior and junior brothers. After being incited by Lu Xiaowen, Xiaomo straightened himself with difficulty and said, Junior brother Lu is right. I should answer for my own acts. I'll look for the Wind Sword sect people right now. Seeing that Xiaomo was about to leave while struggling with all the injuries, the other disciples stopped him immediately. What do you mean answering for your own acts? We are all Xianling sect disciples, and are senior and junior brothers. Deep down, everyone was aware that although the conflict was started because of Xiaomo, the sect's prestige was at stake right now. If Xiaomo were to be handed over, what would become of them? Pieces of trash that betrayed a fellow disciple to ensure their own safety? Lu Xiaowen's expression turned colder. He did not intend to waste any time here. An outer sect elder recently thought highly of him, and he learned quite a number of cultivation techniques, which improved his skills greatly. This delay would waste so much time that could have been used to upgrade himself. Senior brother Lu's words have some reason in them. The number of us is fewer than that of the Wind Sword sect. If they don't retreat, God knows how long we will be surrounded here for. It is already past the mission submission deadline. If we return any later, I'm afraid we would all be punished. Suwan echoed after Lu Xiaowen. Over this period of time, Suwan witnessed Lu Xiaowen's improvement, and she was naturally more hopeful. Given Lu Xiaowen's improvements, it seemed that he probably had a chance of becoming an inner sect disciple in the inner sect assessment next year. As the group was arguing, a few figures suddenly appeared. I was still wondering where you all hid. So it is here. A tall young man who was donned in the Wind Sword sect's outer sect uniform walked with large strides towards the group with over 10 Wind Sword sect disciples following behind him. The appearance of the Wind Sword sect disciples caused the Xianling sect disciples to be on full alert. What do you all want to do? A Xianling sect disciple asked in a low tone. What do we want to do? The leader of the Wind Sword sect disciples scoffed. He scanned the faces of the people from Xianling sect, and his eyes eventually fell on Xiaomo. You Xianling sect disciples do not have any manners, and are actually asking me what I want to do now. He offended a disciple of my sect. Has Xianling sect never taught you how to settle this matter? Qiao Mo's expression was a little ugly. He looked at the blustering and truculent Wind Sword sect people, and then looked back at the miserable appearance of his fellow disciples. He clenched his fists silently, and took a step forward. I was the perpetrator. If you have anything, just come at me. The Wind Sword sect disciple raised a brow at Qiao Mo, and cackled instantly. You have some sense of responsibility. My requirements are not high. His eyes sharpened. Suddenly, he lifted the hem of his clothing, and stepped on a stump with his left foot. Tapping his thigh, he laughed with an ill intention. As long as you crawl between my legs and admit your mistake with 3 kowtows, this matter can be considered to be over. I'll bring my people away immediately, and allow you all to leave the floating light canyon. The expressions of all Xianling sect disciples were extremely ugly upon hearing the Wind Sword sect disciple. Scoundrel! You're going too far. Chapter 365 Mission 4. Go too far? The Wind Sword sect disciple scoffed. The moment he finished his sentence, the group of Wind Sword sect disciples people immediately drew out their swords, which gleamed threateningly. Is it just an apology from him, or all of you seeking death together? The choice is all up to you. Do you think we are really afraid of you? Let's fight if that's what you want. A Xianling sect disciple took it upon himself to draw out his sword in preparation for a fight. Other disciples, similarly, drew out their swords and made their stand clear. Looking at his fellow disciples who fully supported him, Qiao Mo's eyes reddened, touched by the bonds of his fellow disciples. Wuxia world. Sight, you said you'll let all of us go as long as I apologize? Qiao Mo took a deep breath. A man should have dignity and not bow down, not to mention the insult of crawling between one's legs. However, this incident was started because of him, and his fellow disciples were already suffering together with him. Since they had the heart of protecting him, how could he drag them into danger? That's right. I live up to my words. As long as you apologize obediently, we Wind Sword sect disciples are not unreasonable. The Wind Sword sect disciple said with a raised brow. The Xianling sect disciples looked at Qiao Mo in shock, and their faces were agitated. Junior brother Qiao, you must not do it. How could they tolerate others insulting their fellow disciple right before their eyes? As everyone was about to persuade Qiao Mo, Lu Xiaowen suddenly spoke. It cannot be better that Qiao Mo knows clearly the right thing to do, and the principles to follow. Senior brothers, why bother going against Qiao Mo's painstaking decision? This was originally started by him. And now that he can shoulder everything by himself, what is there to not do? Lu Xiaowen, shut up. A Xianling sect disciple glared at Lu Xiaowen angrily. If not for the situation, he would have really killed the heartless betrayer that is Lu Xiaowen. Senior brother Lu didn't say anything wrong. It was Qiao Mo who acted rashly and offended the Wind Sword sect disciple, which caused us to be in such a hopeless situation. Is there anything wrong if he apologizes now? Su Wan echoed. As the Xianling sect disciples argued amongst themselves, the Wind Sword sect disciples snickered as they watched the show. It seems that there are some logical people in Xianling sect as well. It was a casual sentence, but the sarcasm was exceptionally obvious. They were clearly disciples of the same sect, yet they persuaded a fellow disciple to be insulted in fear of being implicated. Such a thing would never happen in their Wind Sword sect. Everyone, my mind is set. I am the one who implicated everyone in this matter. Qiao Mo took a deep breath and walked forward, looking coldly at the Wind Sword sect disciple who lifted a leg and was waiting for him to crawl under. Junior brother Qiao, Wuxia world. Some Xianling sect disciples wanted to stop him, but Qiao Mo had already made up his mind. Shutting his eyes in resignation, he bent his knees and kneeled on the ground. The mockery in the Wind Sword sect disciples' eyes deepened as they waited for Qiao Mo to humiliate himself. However, as Qiao Mo's knees were about to touch the ground, there was a cold sensation on his knees suddenly. Qiao Mo opened his eyes in surprise and suddenly saw a sword was placed across his knees, which supported his knees up straight. Shock flashed past Qiao Mo's eyes. He looked up and saw a stunning girl in a Xianling sect uniform was standing beside him with a smile, while the handle of that sword was in her hands. A man should have dignity and not bow down. How can our Xianling sect disciple kneel down so easily? A casual voice along with a cool breeze entered everyone's ears. On that exquisite face, her cherry-red lips were curled into an evil smile. Chapter 366, Mighty Senior Sister 1. Who are you? The Wind Sword sect disciple saw that the outcome was about to be settled, and did not expect such a thing to happen. That girl tilted her head slightly as her bright eyes glanced across the group of Wind Sword sect disciples. The Wind Sword sect disciple wanted to berate the girl, but was suddenly stopped by his companion. Don't speak carelessly. That is Xianling sect's inner sect disciple. What? The Wind Sword sect disciple fixed his eyes on her. Although the girl was wearing Xianling sect's uniform, it was different from that of Qiao Mo's and the rest, with the most obvious difference being the embroidery that symbolized an inner sect disciple in front of her chest. This look caused the group of Wind Sword sect disciples to pale. Inner sect disciple. They were only a group of outer sect disciples from Wind Sword sect. And as sect disciples, how would they now know the world of differences between the inner and outer sect? It's Senior Sister Yi. A Xianling sect disciple recognized that girl with just a look and was shocked. It's Yi Qingtang? Senior Sister Yi? The moment the Xianling sect disciples saw Yi Qingtang, it was as though they saw a ray of light in their darkness of despair. Xiao Mo fell into a trance as he looked at Yi Qingtang with his mouth hung open. What are you still doing there? Do you want me to help you up? Yi Qingtang raised a brow at the absent-minded Xiao Mo stood up frantically and looked at Yi Qingtang with admiration and respect. The Blood Moon sect elder beside Yi Qingtang scanned the situation, and the corners of his lips tugged up. He still thought that the disappearance of these disciples was related to the Blood Moon sect, but now it seemed that they were just cornered by other sects' disciples. Senior Sister Yi. Seeing Yi Qingtang, an inner sect disciple, the Xianling sect disciples surrounded her, as though they had found a mainstay, and looked at her with eyes full of respect. Yi Qingtang nodded slightly. When she saw Lu Xiuwen and Su Wan, there was not a slight change in her expression. She merely glimpsed past them, as though they were completely unacquainted. Yi Qingtang's sudden appearance caught both Lu Xiuwen and Su Wan by surprise, especially when Xiao Mo and the rest surrounded Yi Qingtang with a look of admiration. Lu Ziyuan's face darkened in an instant. Yi Qingtang simply did not bother with Lu Xiuwen and Su Wan as her eyes were directly fixed on the Wind Sword sect disciples. What were you all doing just now? Yi Qingtang's tone was neither warm nor cold, but to the Wind Sword sect disciples, that emotionless voice was like a rumble of thunder that caused their hearts to quiver. No, nothing much. Upon meeting Yi Qingtang, an inner sect disciple, all arrogance was gone in the Wind Sword sect disciples, who were previously blustering and truculent. Expressions of uneasiness were etched on their faces. They initially thought that these dumb fools from Xianling sect would definitely be toyed around by them. But who would expect that it would actually alarm Xianling sect's inner sect disciple? And how would they be unaware of the frightening skills that inner sect disciples possessed? Even if all of them went up against her together, it was probably not enough to restrain that one girl. Moreover, there was still another inner sect disciple beside her. Just these two people were enough for them to be unable to bear the consequences of failure. Nothing much. Yi Qingtang raised a brow as she took a glimpse at Xiao Mo, whose complexion had not recovered to normal. Chapter 367. Mighty Senior Sister 2. Nothing much, and yet, you dared to make my Xianling sect disciple kneel to you? How bold of you! Yi Qingtang's voice deepened as she spoke. The coldness in her voice caused the Wind Sword sect disciples to break out in cold sweat in fear. It's not it. It's your Xianling sect disciples who started arguing with us first. Thus we had a conflict. A Wind Sword sect disciple mustered his courage and said. This was also the truth in reality. Oh. Yi Qingtang glanced at a few Xianling sect disciples. What happened exactly? Xiao Mo and the rest obviously did not dare to conceal anything, and recounted the incident fully, without leaving out any details. After hearing the account, Yi Qingtang swept a look across the Wind Sword sect disciples' faces. It was a brief glance, but the look in her eyes caused goosebumps to rise on all the Wind Sword sect disciples. So, you want my junior brother to crawl between your legs, and then kowtow to you in apology? Yi Qingtang said coldly, but when she finished her sentence, her eyes suddenly sharpened. She drew out her demonic blood sword angrily. The demonic blood sword, which was just strengthened, was dangerously imposing. The moment it left its scabbard, a cold air spread in the air. The Wind Sword Sect disciple's legs wobbled in fear at the sight. This was the skill of an inner sect disciple. Before making a strike, they were already exuding such a terrifying and overbearing force. The Wind Sword Sect disciples' faces paled instantly, and they did not even dare to let out a fart. Looking at Yi Qingtang, warmth spread in the hearts of Qiao Emo and the rest. Thinking about how they were tightly chased by the Wind Sword Sect disciples for these few days, did they still dare to act so arrogantly to them with senior sister Yi here right now? Yi Qingtang's back view was originally tiny, but at that instant, it seemed extremely tall and large. Why? Are you bullying us because you think our Xianling sect is lacking? Yi Qingtang scoffed. The Wind Sword Sect disciples were about to vomit in fear from Yi Qingtang's aura, but did not dare to retort, and only shook their heads violently. It was just a casual talk. Yet how dare you corner my junior brothers, and not let them go for days? How should I settle this score? Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. The Wind Sword Sect disciples were so close to weeping. A casual talk. How was it a casual talk? It was clearly Qiao Emo who started the fight. Why did it seem like they intentionally stirred up trouble when Yi Qingtang said it? But they did not dare to argue at that instant. The other party was an inner sect disciple, and was on a completely different level from them. When they saw inner sect disciples on usual days, all of them were extremely respectful and cautious. This senior sister over here, you can settle it however you want. The Wind Sword Sect disciples were really frightened then. Yi Qingtang was not anxious to reply, and instead turned around to look at Qiao Emo and the rest. How are your injuries? Their injuries were not severe, and were mostly external injuries. It was just that they seemed rather miserable after being chased. They were about to speak, but Yi Qingtang turned around by herself, and spoke to the Wind Sword Sect disciples. You all caused my junior brothers to be so heavily injured, and delayed their return to the sect to submit their mission. Of course, you all must compensate for their loss. The Wind Sword Sect disciples' eyes were about to pop out. Heavily injured? How were they heavily injured? Qiao Emo and the rest were dumbfounded. Where did senior sister Yi see that they were heavily injured? Chapter 368. Mighty Senior Sister 3. I've long heard that Wind Sword Sect has many spirit pills, including the Elegant Moon Pill, which you all most likely have. Forget it. Each of you just has to compensate 2 bottles of the Elegant Moon Pill, and this matter can be considered to be over, Yi Qingtang said with a smile. The Wind Sword Sect disciples' faces darkened. The Wind Sword Sect's Elegant Moon Pill had similar effects as Xianling Sect's She Spirit Pill, but was more effective. Outer sect disciples like them would only be given 3 bottles every month. Yi Qingtang shaved almost 1 month's quantity away from them. Why? I'm willing. Yi Qingtang looked at the Wind Sword Sect disciples' hesitant faces and smiled faintly. She waved her demonic blood sword, and an aura was shot out from the blade. In just an instant, the sword aura swept across the forest nearby, and like a wave, all the trees within 100 meters away were chopped. A loud crashing sound pierced everyone's ears. Everyone stared at the flattened forest with their mouths hung ajar, as cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. How terrifying was this power? Senior Sister Yi is so powerful. The Xianling sect disciples were in awe. So this was the ability of an inner sect disciple? After seeing the damage that Yi Qingtang did with just a light move, Lu Ziyuan's face darkened to an extreme instantly. Yi Qingtang actually became this powerful. How could this be? Previously, Lu Xiuan had never witnessed Yi Qingtang's skills during the inner sect assessment, and was very skeptical of Yi Qingtang's entrance to the inner sect. However, personally seeing everything today, he suddenly realized that the distance between him and Yi Qingtang had unknowingly widened to a point that it was insurmountable. Even the Blood Moon sect elder beside Yi Qingtang could not help but secretly call her a monster after seeing her skills. It was just a month. How exactly did this girl improve so quickly? the skills of the current Yi Qingtang, and when she was taking the inner sect assessment, was also a world of differences. In reality, Yi Qingtang's skills improved by a large extent in this 1 month since entering the inner sect. The upgrading of her spirit root and the rich spirit energy in the inner sect allowed her skills to improve rapidly. Now, she had already surpassed Khanate level 9 and entered martial qi level 1, a completely unimaginable presence to the outer sect disciples. If you're unwilling, any one of you can come forward to receive one move from me. If you can withstand it, this matter can be settled. Yi Qingtang smiled at the Wind Sword sect disciples, who were all a miserable shade of white, while uttering something that threw them into utter despair. All color was drained from the Wind Sword sect disciples' faces. Who the hell would be able to withstand one move from her? Was this not seeking death? Then no matter how unwilling they were, they could only submit. The group of Wind Sword sect disciples handed the Elegant Moon pills over gloomily. After collecting over 30 bottles of Elegant Moon pill, Yi Qingtang was slightly more satisfied. You all can scram now. The Wind Sword sect disciples did not dare to hang around any longer and fled off hurriedly. Watching them leave, Xiao Mo and the rest felt that their anger was avenged satisfyingly. Thank you, Senior Sister Yi. If not for you today, we would have been humiliated by them. Tears filled the Xianling sect disciples' eyes. It was only when they saw an inner sect disciple from their sect during a crisis and were saved from misery did it occur to them how precious their clothes that symbolized Xianling sect disciple were. Chapter 369. Mighty Senior Sister 4. There was a smile in Yi Qingtang's eyes as she looked at the group of disciples. Temporarily leaving aside the fact that the disciples competed amongst each other within the sect, all of them were shouldering the same sect glory once they were out of the sect. We are from the same sect. There's no need to thank me, Yi Qingtang said with a smile. Afterward, she handed the Wind Sword sect disciples compensation of over 30 Elegant Moon pills to the leading disciple. These are Wind Sword sect's compensation to you all. Divide it amongst yourselves. The disciples shook their heads in a fluster. No. We cannot accept these, Senior Sister Yi. If not for you, we would have either died or been heavily insulted and injured. We cannot accept these items. Yi Qingtang looked at them funnily. Why can't you accept it? They compensated you all, not me. Furthermore, I only said a few sentences. You are all injured and are delayed by a few days. If not compensated well, you all would fall behind others. The disciples were at a loss of whether to laugh or cry. Senior Sister, those few sentences that you said then were the key. Calculating the price of these Elegant Moon pills, and then the number of sentences that Yi Qingtang said. A single word from her was really almost worth 1,000 taels of gold. The group could not win over Yi Qingtang, and could only accept it reluctantly, though their hearts were deeply filled with gratitude. Lu Xiuwen and Su Wan had been lingering outside, and did not near Yi Qingtang. It was as though the two of them were isolated by the group. Yi Qingtang naturally did not pay them any attention, and took a leave first, after leaving some instructions for the group. The mission this time was rather simple, and unrelated to the Blood Moon sect. Everything was smooth. Yi Qingtang had just left, but the disciples had still not returned to their senses from Yi Qingtang's valiant and heroic bearing. As outer sect disciples, they rarely had chances to interact with inner sect disciples. To them, the words inner sect was unreachable and extremely mysterious. Senior Sister Yi is such a nice person. Xiao Mo scratched his head, and his eyes were filled with gratitude. Did you all see clearly just now? That one move from Senior Sister Yi was so domineering. A disciple was still absorbed in that one move that Yi Qingtang unleashed previously. Just looking at the many trees that were chopped, one could tell how frightening that sword aura was. Did Senior Sister Yi use the sword aura just now? Weren't only martial qi level ones able to use it? Why do I remember that? Senior Sister Yi had only entered the inner sect for 1 month. The famous story of Yi Qingtang's entrance into the inner sect had long circulated in the outer sect, and the few of them were not unfamiliar with it. However, after seeing her in person today, they realized Senior Sister Yi was way more domineering than the rumors had told her to be. Senior Sister Yi was able to advance from Khanate level 9 to Martial Qi level 1 in a month's time. She is indeed powerful, and truly the disciple who entered the inner sect in the shortest time. If I have just 10% of her skills, I would be content already. Everyone was full of exclamation over Yi Qingtang's skills, and did not notice that Lu Ziyuan's face was extremely somber. He had felt that he improved greatly in this 1 month, yet unexpectedly, Yi Qingtang's skills improved at a tremendous pace. With just that little improvement of his, it was an utter joke in comparison to Yi Qingtang. Su Wan looked at Lu Ziyuan's somber side profile, and did not dare to say anything further. However, from the incident today, Su Wan realized Yi Qingtang had long been at another level. Chapter 370 Rage 1. Why did you just let the people from the Wind Sword sect go? The Blood Moon sect elder followed Yi Qingtang as she walked out of the floating light canyon. He suddenly had other thoughts in his mind. Yi Qingtang stopped and took a glance at the Blood Moon sect elder. Source of the marrow pill. The Blood Moon sect elder was stunned as he heard the words. I just asked only, haha. He avoided Yi Qingtang's eyesight, but how he wished to strangle the girl in front of him. The Blood Moon sect elder felt depressed. Yi Qingtang joined the mission for the sect and the Xianming points. But what could he get? Nothing in the sect was attractive to him, especially the honor of the sect. He could only bear with it when Yi Qingtang suppressed him. Yi Qingtang rubbed her brows as she looked at the Blood Moon sect elder. The old guy would not even behave for a second. If she did not watch him tightly, he would definitely target others. The mission was smooth this time. Yi Qingtang did not wish to waste any time, as she still needed to cultivate in the inner sect. She then rushed back to Xianling sect. The Blood Moon sect elder returned to his yard gloomily when they returned to the sect. Yi Qingtang was amused by his expression and decided to refine some source of the marrow pills for him in the next few days. Yi Qingtang returned to her yard, but she realized that something was not right when she pushed open the gate of the yard. Since she provided Fei Ying and Inai Shang with basic cultivation technique previously, they would cultivate and practice all the time in the yard. However, the yard now was empty and messy. There was the smell of blood in the air. An uneasy feeling rose in her heart. She then rushed into the yard and saw pools of blood on the stone path at the center of the yard. The blood was dry now, but it still struck her eyes. Young lady. A weak voice came from the house at the side. Yi Qingtang looked towards the house, and she was totally stunned. Fei Ying, who was injured heavily, laid at the door, and his face was full of wounds. You are finally back. Young lady. Yi Qingtang felt uneasier as she looked at his injured body. She then noticed that Inai Shang was not around. She dashed towards Fei Ying and asked, Where is Inai Shang? Fei Ying shivered as he heard the question. Tears flowed out of his swollen eyes. He kneeled in front of Yi Qingtang and knocked his head on the ground constantly. Young lady, please save Inai Shang. What happened? Yi Qingtang held Fei Ying's collar and dragged him up. Fei Ying was choked with sobs. Inai Shang was brought away by them. I was so useless. I couldn't protect her. Young lady, please, you are the only one who can save her now. Fei Ying told everything to Yi Qingtang slowly. After Yi Qingtang left for her mission, Fei Ying and Inai Shang used all the time to cultivate and guard the yard. They wanted to help Yi Qingtang to look after the silver wolf, but it disappeared one day. Both of them were nervous and worried about the silver wolf. However, danger approached them secretly. Chapter 371, Rage 2. Though Inai Shang was still young, she was almost a fully grown girl with a pretty face. She was quite attractive among the attendant girls. Before Inai Shang was assigned to Yi Qingtang, some inner sect disciples would flirt with her. She did not dare to resist, and she was still young. The situation was better after she was assigned to Yi Qingtang. However, after Yi Qingtang left, the 3 disciples who liked to flirt with her came again, with Song Juanxiu. The 4 inner sect disciples broke into Yi Qingtang's yard and kidnapped Inai Shang. Fei Ying wanted to stop them, but he was not strong enough to fight against them. He was beaten heavily until he fainted but still could not stop them. Young lady, I'm aware that we are just servants and that our lives worth nothing. But Inai Shang is always loyal. Please save her. Fei Ying begged Yi Qingting constantly, and kneeled onto the floor again. He ignored his injuries, and knocked his head heavily onto the ground. The blood on his forehead was transferred onto the stone ground. Yi Qingting took a heavy breath and asked, "Besides Song Juanxiu, who are the other 3 people?" Fei Ying then said the names of the other 3 people. Yi Qingting felt her brain almost explode after hearing the names. The names that Fei Ying said were the 3 inner sect disciples that he killed in her previous life. That was the reason why she did not hear of Enai Shang's name in her previous life. Enai Shang in her previous life most likely did not survive the incident, and was tortured to death by the 3 disciples. Fei Ying was stimulated by Enai Shang's death, and his potential was discovered. He worked hard and became an inner sect disciple. He then tortured the 3 disciples to death. Everything now overlapped with the information from her previous life. Just this time, there was a Song Juanxiu. "Young lady, please save her. As long as you are willing to save her, I will serve you for the rest of my life." Fei Ying continued begging. He was slightly younger than Enai Shang, and she always took care of him. He always treated Enai Shang as his sister. He hated himself the most when Enai Shang was humiliated. He hated his weakness and inability. He hated that he did not have the ability to protect her. He also knew that they were inferior compared to the disciples. Even though Yi Qingting was their young lady, she did not have the duty to provoke other disciples for them. However, he had no other way. "I understand now." Yi Qingting narrowed her eyes and said slowly. She frowned heavily as her sight landed on Fei Ying, who was kneeling in front of her. "Follow me." Yi Qingting then walked out of the yard. Fei Ying was stunned and raised his head. His face was full of confusion. "You better hurry up if you want to save her." Yi Qingting's voice was cold but anxious. She did not know when Enai Shang was killed in her previous life. According to Fei Ying, Enai Shang was kidnapped 3 days ago. If they did not save her on time, she might. Fei Ying then realized what Yi Qingting was going to do. He wiped off his tears and got up from the floor and caught up with Yi Qingting. The Blood Moon sect elder, who just left his yard, suddenly saw Yi Qingting. He wanted to escape instinctively, but Yi Qingting was covered by a murderous look. Chapter 372, Rage 3. The Blood Moon sect elder was shocked. What was going on? Why was she so fierce? Was she going to eat someone alive? The Blood Moon sect elder then followed them to figure out what was going on. Outside the practice hall, Song Juanxiu was with the 3 disciples. Their faces were very pleasant. That girl's growth is not bad at her age. She will be nicer after a few years. After a few years? I think her innocence now is just right. It is so satisfying to watch her begging me. The 3 disciples laughed, and their faces were full of contentment. Song Juanxiu sneered as he saw how filthy the people were. He did not care about the girl at all. He was involved just because Enai Shang was Yi Qingting's servant. Song Juanxiu resented her so much every time he recalled how Yi Qingting framed him, and how he lost so many bottles of Song Juanxiu to Feng Moli. Now Yi Qingting was not in the sect. There was no issue for inner sect disciples to punish her attendant girl. When the 3 people were discussing, Song Juanxiu noticed a person approaching. He narrowed his eyes and exchanged glances with the 3 people. The 3 of them stopped their discussion and looked towards the person. All 3 of them laughed. "Isn't this our junior sister Yi? What happened to your sword boy? How come he is injured? It's a bit too harsh for you to treat your servant like this." One of the disciples smiled and said. His arrogant face appeared so disgusting. Fei Ying, who followed Yi Qingting, wanted to go forward when he saw Song Juanxiu and the 3 people, but he was stopped by Yi Qingting. "Junior sister Yi, what are you so angry for?" Song Juanxiu smiled, but his scornful sight glanced at Yi Qingting. "Where is Enai Shang?" Fei Ying stared at them and asked. Song Juanxiu took a glance at Fei Ying and sneered. His eyes were full of disdain. He looked at Yi Qingting and said, "Junior sister Yi, where are your servant's manners? A mere sword boy dares to challenge your inner sect disciples?" Yi Qingting squinted her eyes and pulled Fei Ying back. She scanned through their faces, and she suddenly smiled. "I had entered the inner sect for a month now. I heard that inner sect disciples could compete among ourselves. Senior brothers, are you willing to compete against me in the life and death ring?" Yi Qingtang asked. Life and death ring? Song Juanxiu and the rest were stunned. The sect did not allow private fighting among the disciples, but there were always conflicts between disciples. To ban private fighting, there was a life and death ring in the inner sect. On the life and death ring, death was determined by destiny. Even if one were to die on the ring, no one would receive any punishment. However, fighting on the life and death ring needed to be approved by the inner sect wardens. Both parties had to sign the life and death agreement. Yi Qingtang just entered the sect for a month, and she dared to challenge them. Song Juanxiu and the rest laughed when they realized what she was talking about. Junior sister Yi, you want to go on to the life and death ring against 4 of us? Are you joking? Chapter 373. Life and Death Ring. 1. A new disciple who just entered the sect for a month challenged 4 people to fight on the life and death ring. Was she trying to commit suicide? Song Juanxiu sneered. He realized that she was trying to take revenge for an Aishang. However, Wuxia world. Sight, did she not know her own abilities? How did she dare to be so arrogant? She was going to commit suicide. Feiying was stunned as well. He heard of the life and death ring, as he spent quite a long time in the inner sect. He hated these 4 people, but he did not expect Yi Qingtang to want to fight against them on the life and death ring for an Aishang. Feiying was a little bewildered. He held Yi Qingtang's sleeves, and he was very nervous. Miss, the martial qi level 1 had 4 heavens. Every heaven consisted of 3 stages. They had been in the inner sect for a few years. The 3 disciples were at the 2nd stage of the 1st heaven of martial qi level 1, and Song Juanxiu was at the 3rd stage. Yi Qingtang had only entered the inner sect for a month, and she just reached the 1st heaven of the martial qi level 1. She was at the 1st stage of the 1st heaven. There was a great difference in ability between her and the 3 disciples, and a greater difference with Song Juanxiu. With every stage difference of the marital qi, the difference of the ability was immense. It was suicide for Yi Qingtang to challenge the 4 people on the life and death ring alone. I'm not joking. Do you dare to accept my challenge? Yi Qingtang looked at the 4 people seriously. They suddenly laughed. Of course we accept. Why not? Since you are so brave, we have to accept your challenge. Song Juanxiu smiled. Invite the warden over now. Since junior sister Yi has met the requirements, we must accept as her senior brothers, Song Juanxiu said to one of the disciples. The disciple immediately invited the warden over. The warden was surprised as he heard that Yi Qingtang wanted to challenge the 4 people at the same time on the life and death ring. The 5 of you, are you sure about it? The warden asked cautiously. He revealed a complex look as he turned towards Yi Qingtang. The life and death ring was a dangerous ring in the inner sect. There were some disciples who challenged others on the ring, but Yi Qingtang, as a new disciple, wanted to challenge 4 people at the same time. What nonsense! Yes, Yi Qingtang replied firmly. Then the 5 of you have to sign the life and death agreement. Whether you live or die on the ring will depend on your destiny, the warden said after seeing that his persuasion was not working. The 5 of them did not object, and signed the agreement in front of the warden. Song Juanxiu was the last to sign. He sneered as he saw Yi Qingtang's name on the agreement. Wuxia world. Sight, he wanted to teach Yi Qingtang a lesson, but she was rushing to commit suicide. Even if they were to beat her to death on the ring, no one would say anything about them. The challenge will be 10 days later. You shall go to the life and death ring. The warden kept away the agreement and left a reminder. Song Juanxiu stared at Yi Qingtang in an evil way after the warden left. Junior sister Yi, I shall wait for you at the life and death ring 10 days later. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. Wait, she suddenly said as Song Juanxiu and the rest were about to leave. Are you sure you are going to fight against them together on the life and death ring? The Blood Moon sect elder said. Yi Qingtang now is still weaker than the weakest person in the 4 of them. How could she win? You don't need to worry about this, Yi Qingtang replied. The Blood Moon sect elder was stunned. I would have never cared for you if you did not bribe me with the bonded soul pill. I wish you die as soon as possible. Yi Qingtang headed back after signing the life and death agreement. Not long after Yi Qingtang and Feiying returned to their home, and Aishang was sent back by Song Junkius people. Chapter 375. Life and Death Ring 3. But when Yi Qingtang saw Aishang's current appearance, it was as though a huge rock was pressed on her chest, causing her to be so stifled that breathing was difficult. The usually petite and pretty girl was laying on bed breathlessly. Her tiny body was covered with bruises, and her clothes were already badly torn. Her fair face was discolored from the bruises, and there was a huge cut on her forehead of which blood flowed along her temples and stained the pillow under her head completely red. Aishang. Fei Ying saw Aishang's tragic appearance and broke down on the floor immediately. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes at Aishang's situation, and her breathing deepened. "Get out," Yi Qingtang ordered coldly. Aishang sustained too many injuries, and if not treated immediately, she would be completely crippled even if she kept her life. Looking at Yi Qingtang's cold side profile, Fei Ying did not dare to hesitate and immediately left the room. He shut the door tight and collapsed against it. He clasped his hands tightly and placed it against his forehead as he prayed repeatedly. He was too useless, and thus caused Aishang to suffer such torture. He must become stronger. No matter what price he had to pay, he must obtain more power and never ever allow the people around him to suffer again. In the room, Yi Qingtang took out many elixirs from her space ring and swiftly checked Aishang's injuries. Aishang had countless internal and external injuries. Just looking at those hideous wounds, she did not dare to imagine what kind of torture and humiliation she suffered in these 3 days. Looking at Aishang's current appearance, Yi Qingtang could not help but recall the young girl's shy smile when she nervously called her miss on the first day they met. Yi Qingtang took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the murderous intent in her heart. "Song Juanxiu, just you wait. I will definitely return this 100-fold. Yi Qingtang forced herself to calm down and used the spirit energy in her body to heal her injuries. She poured large amounts of elixirs into Aishang's mouth without finding it a shame, all to ensure that Aishang kept on to her last breath. After encountering this incident right after she returned, she was fully occupied from day to late night. Aishang's condition finally stabilized a little. As her breathing gradually stabilized, her tightly shut eyes opened with difficulty. When her clear eyes were open, terror and despair were written in her eyes as she let out a shrill cry. Don't touch me." Aishang crawled up in fear. Trembling, she clutched on the blanket tightly and curled up in the corner of the bed. Her struggle caused the wound that had yet to heal to rip open once again, and gushes of blood stained the pure white bandage. "Aishang, it's me. Don't be afraid." Upon seeing Aishang's terrified behavior, Yi Qingtang did her best to gently comfort Aishang. Aishang could not stop trembling in fear. After seeing that the person before her was Yi Qingtang, it was as though her body broke down entirely as her purpled lips quivered and parted slightly. "Me, miss." Large teardrops slid out from her eyes silently. Looking at Yi Qingtang, who was like the last straw to clutch at, she fell into Yi Qingtang's arms in despair. "Miss, you're back. You're finally back." A heart-wrenching voice escaped Aishang's mouth. Chapter 376. Life and Death Ring 4. Yi Qingtang lightly hugged the tiny frame that never stopped trembling, and her brows furrowed. "It's all over. I am back already. No one can ever harm you again." Aishang clutched onto Yi Qingtang's clothes tightly and choked in between sobs. No one could imagine what kind of suffering she went through in these few days. Yi Qingtang's heart ached as she pacified the young girl. Rage gradually flamed up within her as she felt a warm sensation on her blouse due to Aishang's tears. In the room, Aishang's cries traveled out from the cracks of the door. Upon hearing Aishang's heartbreaking cries, Fei Ying, who was sitting outside the door, felt as if a knife was pierced in his heart. He clenched his teeth and punched the hard rock ground. Even though his knuckles were bleeding badly, it never suppressed the excruciating pain in his heart. Aishang cried for a long time. With her age, how difficult must it have been for her to go through those 3 days of torture? She mumbled the torture she experienced in these few days in choppy sentences. The more Yi Qingtang listened, the more the murderous feeling in her intensified. In her previous life, Shang did not meet Yi Qingtang, and did not have the slightest ability to protect herself, thus ending up being tortured to death. But this time, the only lucky thing was that Shang was never really humiliated by those three bastards. Before this, the cultivation techniques that Yi Qingtang taught Shang protected Shang's last thread of dignity. While she was unable to escape, she resisted desperately, and never allowed the three disciples to have their way, though the number of beatings she suffered from the resistance was not little. Shang was exhausted from crying, and her originally frail body could not support itself. Between sobs, she eventually fell into a deep slumber in Yi Qingtang's arms. However, there no longer was neither pain nor despair on Shang's face this time. She knew that Miss was back, and she was finally safe. Yi Qingtang gently settled Shang in bed, and left the room. There was a faint smell of blood outside. There were no emotions on her face when she saw Fei Ying, who collapsed outside the door, and his badly battered fists, which left a trail of blood on the ground. "Do you hate it?" Yi Qingtang asked with a low voice. Fei Ying looked down and nodded firmly. "Become stronger then. Strong enough to protect the people around you, and never let them suffer again. Otherwise, even if you kill yourself from the hatred, it would only be a joke to those people," Yi Qingtang said coldly. Fei Ying suddenly looked up. In the dark night, his bright yet sharp eyes were like knives from which the innocence belonging to a young teen was completely absent. "Miss, I wish to become stronger." Yi Qingtang chuckled and nodded. "I will teach you after the life and death ring. Before that, you must take good care of Shang. Do you hear me?" "Yes." Fei Ying gave a firm nod, but worry suddenly emerged in his heart. "Miss, that life and death ring. I know my limits." Afterward, Yi Qingtang returned to her own room. Shang's injuries weighed heavily on Yi Qingtang's heart. She was clearly aware that her current skills were not considered the top amongst the inner sect disciples. But she must avenge Shang without a doubt. There were still 10 days left. She must make a breakthrough in these 10 days. Otherwise, even if she went on the life and death ring, she would be the one who died. In her room, her eyes narrowed as she thought of the life and death ring that was going to happen 10 days later. 10 days. Chapter 377. Ice and Fire. 1. Yi Qingtang was only at the first stage of the first heaven, in the martial Qi level 1 realm, while Song Juanxia was already at the third stage of the first heaven, and was only a step away from entering the second heaven. To win against Song Juanxia, and the rest on the life and death ring, the only option for her was to break through to the second heaven state in these 10 days. However, to advance an entire realm in such a short span of time was easier said than done. Yi Qingtang was able to achieve remarkable improvements on the eve of the inner sect assessment back then by relying on the effects that the upgrade of her spirit root brought. Yi Qingtang realized that every time her spirit root was improved, her abilities would increase by leaps and bounds. Currently, she was already an orange spirit root, and while the inner sect was rich in spirit energy, she could clearly feel that the advancement of her spirit root was gradually slowing. The higher the spirit root was, the harder it was to nourish it. The reason she came to Xianling sect was for the Black Heaven water in Xianling sect's mystic realm, which the Palace Lord of the Antiquity Palace talked about the other day. Only the Black Heaven water could allow her spirit root to improve at a faster speed. It was just that there were still months to the start of the mystic realm, and only highly ranked disciples in the inner sect have the qualifications to enter. Given Yi Qingtang's current position in the inner sect, she would probably not have the qualification to enter even if the mystic realm opened. She only had 10 days worth of time then. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes as she pondered over the methods which could increase her skills rapidly. Her eyes swept across the room, but realized a familiar figure was missing. Xiao Guai. Astonished, Yi Qingtang stood up and searched around her courtyard to no avail, with only the little lightning dragon laying on the bed dejectedly. She only found out from Fei Ying that the silver wolf disappeared unknowingly after she left, and they could not find it despite days of searching. What is going on exactly? Yi Qingtang's brows were furrowed tightly. When she was in the outer sect, she had entrusted the silver wolf under Qin Huan's care, as well when she went out on a mission. But when she returned, Qin Huan said the silver wolf disappeared. It was just that Yi Qingtang thought Qin Huan was blabbering nonsense when she saw the silver wolf. Yet unexpectedly, the silver wolf actually disappeared again. Yi Qingtang found it strange, but could not see any traces of the silver wolf. The life and death ring was going to happen 10 days later, and she could not be distracted to search for it right now. Furthermore, Fei Ying had to take care of an Aishang. Thus, she could only suppress the matter for the moment. She did not know whether it was an illusion or not, but she was not the slightest anxious, although she knew the silver wolf was nowhere to be found, as though she had a premonition somehow. The disappearance of the silver wolf was not because of any external factors, but its own decision. Leaving the disappearance case aside, Yi Qingtang focused on the matter at hand. With her usual cultivation, breaking through from stage 1 of the first heaven to the second heaven in 10 days was almost impossible. Time was limited, and Yi Qingtang could only take another route. The next morning, Yi Qingtang dragged the drowsy Blood Moon sect elder up. "How many Xianming points do you still have?" Yi Qingtang suddenly asked. The Blood Moon sect elder was still half asleep as he looked at the number on his bracelet. About 2,000. A large portion of the Xianming points was left by Zhou Chu. Since the Blood Moon sect elder did not find a use for anything, he had never touched it at all, and even earned quite an amount from the mission with Yi Qingtang before. "Give it to me," Yi Qingtang said straightforwardly. "What?" The Blood Moon sect elder was slightly stunned. Yi Qingtang could not be bothered to explain anything, and took out a bottle of the summoning soul pills. "Exchange or not?" Chapter 378. Ice and Fire 2. Exchange, exchange, exchange. The Blood Moon sect elder's eyes flickered after seeing the summoning soul pill. Xianming points were only a string of numbers to him without any use, but the summoning soul pill was a baby. Then, the Blood Moon sect elder slid all his Xianming points to Yi Qingtang's bracelet and hugged that bottle of summoning soul pills with a blissful smile. With the 2,000 Xianming points from the Blood Moon sect elder, and the few thousands she had, Yi Qingtang had nearly 6,000 Xianming points. Subsequently, she sprinted to the Xianming pavilion with the curious Blood Moon sect elder, following right after. Yi Qingtang's arrival in the pavilion immediately drew the attention of many disciples. "Yi Qingtang? I heard that she issued a challenge on the life and death ring to Song Juanxiu and his 3 followers yesterday. Is it true? Can it not be? The life and death agreement was already signed. In my opinion, she is simply seeking death. She just entered the inner sect for a month, yet dared to issue a challenge to 4 people. If that isn't seeking death, then what is? Why do I remember that Yi Qingtang is a red spirit root? It was already pretty strange when she entered the inner sect previously. Why is she stirring up trouble now? She is the only red spirit root in the inner sect, which is rather amazing if I were to say. However, she is a little overboard on this matter. What is her skill level now? She's at most stage 1 of the first heaven in martial chi level 1. But she actually dared to challenge them? Fighting against 4 people at one go. Is she really tired of living? Just an inflated ego. There was a clamor of discussion amongst the disciples. The news of Yi Qingtang challenging Song Junkius clique had already circulated widely in the inner sect, provoking much noise. It could be said to be the biggest joke in the inner sect recently. Yi Qingtang walked into the Xianming pavilion without bothering about the discussions. "I want to exchange for the quenching flame pill," Yi Qingtang said to the Xianming pavilion warden. The quenching flame pill was a type of pill that could stimulate spirit energy and allow the spirit energy in one's body to reach a peak in a short span of time. The disciples watched Yi Qingtang in curiosity and reckoned that the quenching flame pill that she exchanged for was to be used on the life and death ring. However, while the quenching flame pill could boost one's skills in a short time, the duration of the peak state was extremely short. Moreover, it could stimulate the spirit energy to the maximum, because it forcefully catalyzed the effect of the spirit energy in the body. Once the effect wore off, the user would fall into a frail condition very quickly. Even if Yi Qingtang consumed the quenching flame pill and displayed her peak abilities, it would still be difficult for her to deal with Song Juanxiu and the rest on the life and death ring. After all, She had not reached the realm of those 4 disciples, and the difference of a stage was enough to produce a landslide victory. The warden looked at Yi Qingtang and said, 100 xianming points for 1 pill. How many pills do you want? After making an estimation, Yi Qingtang finally replied, 20. Yi Qingtang's words caused the onlooking disciples to be dumbfounded. 20 pills? Is she treating the quenching flame pill as a mud ball? Disciples would only prepare at most 1 pill on usual days. Who would buy 20 pills at once? Is she insane? If she swallowed all of them in a go, wouldn't she explode and die? The warden clearly did not expect Yi Qingtang to ask for so many as well, and only returned to his senses after a while. You want 20 pills? Yes. Yi Qingtang nodded. The warden looked at Yi Qingtang strangely, and really could not figure out what she wanted those for. However, since she wanted to exchange for the items, he naturally did not have any reason to stop her. Chapter 379. Ice and Fire 3. The warden took out 20 quenching flame pills and slid away 2,000 xianming points from Yi Qingtang. To intersect disciples, 2,000 xianming points were not considered to be a huge pinch in their hearts, but it was not a small amount either. When the disciples saw Yi Qingtang wasting 2,000 xianming points just like that, they could not help but mumble that she was a fool. Yi Qingtang kept the quenching flame pills, but did not leave. She calculated her remaining xianming points and subsequently said, I still wish to exchange for ice skin powder. Ice skin powder? The warden raised a brow as he looked at Yi Qingtang, with an even stranger expression. If the quenching flame pill was to stimulate spirit energy, then the ice skin powder was a medicinal powder, which could completely seal the spirit energy in the body. It was often smeared over one's body during hunting, as it could conceal the air released by the spirit energy. However, it would also suppress the use of spirit energy, and hence, most would wipe off the ice skin powder cleanly in a real fight. The 2 items that Yi Qingtang asked for consecutively were conflicting in nature, and the warden was even more confused as to what Yi Qingtang had up her sleeves. The surrounding disciples were all the more at a loss. Could it be that Yi Qingtang still intended to use the ice skin powder as a secret weapon and scatter it all over Song Juanxiu, and the rest on the life and death ring? Just the thought of that caused them to be unable to stifle their laughter. There was not much use for the ice skin powder, and thus the xianming points required were not much. However, Yi Qingtang used all her remaining 3,000 xianming points to exchange for 2 whole buckets of ice skin powder. Without a single xianming point left, Yi Qingtang finally returned to her residence. As the disciples watched Yi Qingtang leave with 2 buckets of ice skin powder, without saying anything, laughter played in the eyes of the disciples in the Xianming Pavilion. Near 6,000 xianming points were spent just like that? How extravagant! If I were to say, wouldn't it be better to cultivate a few hours in the Spirit Consonance River with those xianming points? What can she do with a pile of quenching flame pills and ice skin powder? Could she swallow all 20 quenching flame pills in a go on the life and death ring? Swallow all? Don't kid me. If she consumed so many of it in a short time, Yi Qingtang would just die on the ring without Song Juanxiu, and the rest laying a finger. Watching Yi Qingtang's slowly departing back view, the disciples could not stop snickering as they felt that Yi Qingtang was walking further down the path of death. They were afraid that she would have an ugly death 10 days later. After leaving Xianming Pavilion, Yi Qingtang returned to her residence straight away. Fei Ying was still looking after Aishang. Thus, Yi Qingtang got herself a bathtub of hot water. She shut her door tightly, and laid the quenching flame pills and the ice skin powder aside. Her eyes were narrowed as she looked at the room that was lingering with mist. After testing the temperature of the water, she immediately poured half a bucket of ice skin powder into the bathtub. The ice skin powder, which gave off a cold air, dissolved in the water. Immediately, the water that was initially producing steam lost all its heat, and was faintly emitting a slight tinge of cold air. Seeing that the ice skin powder was completely dissolved, Yi Qingtang subsequently took off her outer cloak and entered the bathtub. The ice-cold water brimmed over her in an instant. The effect of half a bucket of ice skin powder caused the water in the bathtub to drop to a piercingly cold temperature. In just a moment, Yi Qingtang's complexion turned pale from the cold. However, she took a deep breath and forced herself to bear the bitter cold. She sat in the bathtub cross-legged, trying with all her might to ignore the prickling cold on her skin. Chapter 380. Ice and Fire 4. Yi Qingtang took a deep breath and swallowed a quenching flame pill. The quenching flame pill dissolved the moment it entered her mouth, with its bitterness mixed with a burning sensation, traveling down from her throat to her abdomen. Instantly, a blazing-like burn spread throughout Yi Qingtang's abdomen. The boiling hot sensation in her body and the piercing cold on her skin formed a distinct contrast. Under the catalysis of the quenching flame pill, the spirit energy in Yi Qingtang's body began to surge continuously throughout her entire body and reached a peak. That surging spirit energy desperately wanted to escape the body in search of a place to be released, but the water that was mixed with large quantities of ice skin powder, which her body was submerged in, sealed that wild energy in her body, with not a tiny bit being leaked out. To advance one realm in 10 days was absolutely not what an ordinary person could achieve, and definitely impossible for even a rare genius of a century. To win the life and death ring 10 days later, she had to take another route. What she did today was an extreme method which stimulated her potential. She used the medicinal effect of the quenching flame pill to stimulate her spirit energy to a peak in a short span of time, and then used the ice skin powder to seal all the spirit energy in the body. This type of cultivation method was only discovered 100 years later in her previous life, and obviously, no one was aware of it currently. As long as Yi Qingtang could withstand the torture of the two extremes of ice and fire, she could continue to be at her ultimate limit. Cultivating under this extreme condition could allow the improvement in her cultivation to be maximized. However, there was a drawback to this cultivation method. Forcefully sealing the surging spirit energy in her body would be an extremely great burden to the spirit root. If the spirit energy surged too much, the spirit root might even be damaged and ruined. Hence, in her previous life, although many knew of this method which could increase their skills rapidly, only a few dared to use it. However, Yi Qingtang knew a method which could avoid the spirit root from being ruined. Yi Qingtang slowly raised the floating pagoda that was held in her hand for a long time. She placed her hands together and positioned the floating pagoda in her palm. In the interlacing of ice and fire, she calmed her heart and catalyzed the floating pagoda, guiding its energy into her body bit by bit. These floating pagodas were obtained back in the treasure pavilion in Lin Town. All this while, she had always used the floating pagoda to nourish her spirit root. Floating pagodas were rather effective in nourishing the spirit root, and in this extreme cultivation method, it could protect the spirit root from suffering any damage. Yi Qingtang still had a few floating pagodas in her hands, which should be enough for 10 days of cultivation. With the floating pagoda's protection of the spirit root, which isolated the damage from the quenching flame pill, Yi Qingtang calmed her heart and regulated her breathing, completely absorbed in her cultivation. In the torment of the extremities, she directed the spirit energy in her body to her 8 extraordinary meridians. With the flow of the spirit energy, Yi Qingtang could clearly feel that the spirit energy in her body was increasing sharply along with time. Delight filled her, but she did not dare to move around. In just an instant, she calmed down and continued cultivating. Because the spirit energy was always sealed in the body, the effect of the quenching flame pill did not disappear completely, and this extreme cultivation could be sustained. Yi Qingtang calculated the duration of the effect that each quenching flame pill could last, which was roughly at most 8 hours. She required at least 2 pills a day, which was why she bought 20 of them. Chapter 381. My Person 1. A few days later, Anai Shang's injuries slowly healed, and Fei Ying finally heaved a sigh of relief. However, Yi Qingtang remained in her room in these few days and never stepped out. Apart from asking Fei Ying to leave a few buckets of hot water at her door every 2 days, she did not have any orders, and even settled her meals in the room by herself. During this period of time, Ji Xianyuan heard that Yi Qingtang was about to enter the life and death ring, and came a few times, but was blocked by Fei Ying, who said that Yi Qingtang was not receiving any guests. Days passed, and the life and death ring matter circulated around the entire inner sect. The life and death ring was not the same as normal rings, since they were really battling with their lives. Although there was such a rule in the inner sect, only a few dared to enter the life and death ring. In the past 3 years, Yi Qingtang was the only disciple who initiated a life and death ring challenge, and her opponents were as many as 4 people. As everyone was absorbed in discussions, it was as though Yi Qingtang disappeared from everyone's sight, and almost no one saw her in any martial arts hall. Could Yi Qingtang be scared already? If it were you, wouldn't you be scared? Do you dare to go through such suffering? I think it's still not too late for her to regret now. I heard that Song Juanxiu and the rest did not have any special reaction these few days. What reaction should they have? All 4 of them are more skilled than Yi Qingtang, and any one of them could play Yi Qingtang to death. Do they still need to train hard? Don't joke anymore. Seeing that there was only a day left to the life and death ring, everyone could not help but be curious about whether Yi Qingtang really dared to take on the challenge the next day. In the courtyard, moonlight scattered over the ground in the dark night. Aishang, whose face was still bruised, walked to Yi Qingtang's room with a tray of dishes in her hands, and saw Fei Ying guarding outside the door. Fei Ying shook his head. Aishang could not help but be worried. Miss has already cultivated in seclusion for 10 days, and never left her room. What should we do? I am all to blame. If not because of me, Miss would not need to enter whatever life and death ring with those 4 bastards. Guilt was written all over Aishang's face. In the eyes of inner sect disciples, attendant girls like them were no different from servants, and it was already lucky to not be mistreated or lambasted. No one had thought that the inner sect disciple they followed would stand up for them. After regaining consciousness, she heard from Fei Ying that Yi Qingtang was to enter the life and death ring. One could imagine how shocking Yi Qingtang's decision was to Aishang. I'm so useless. I can't do anything for Miss and can only worry. Aishang bit her lips. A thought suddenly struck her, and she turned to face Fei Ying. Fei Ying, if Miss doesn't enter the life and death ring tomorrow, do you think she would be safe? Fei Ying was slightly stunned. The life and death agreement is already signed. If Miss doesn't enter, she would probably be ridiculed by everyone in the future. Given Miss' character, she will not be able to bear it. Aishang pursed her lips, and a resolute expression flashed across her eyes. She suddenly handed the tray of dishes into Fei Ying's hands. Take care of Mississippi. With that, she prepared to leave. Aishang, what do you want to do? An ominous thought emerged in Fei Ying's heart, and he quickly pulled Aishang's wrist. Aishang took a deep breath and explained. I cannot let Miss be involved in this. This matter was started because of me. How could I stand around and not do anything? I will look for them. I know what they want. As long as I beg them, perhaps they will let Miss off. Chapter 382. My person too. Fei Ying's eyes suddenly widened as he stared at Aishang in disbelief. You. Aishang laughed bitterly and broke free from Fei Ying's grip. Take good care of Miss for me. It is me who doesn't have this blessing. I've troubled Mississippi. Then, Aishang immediately headed out of the courtyard without turning back. Aishang. Fei Ying was alarmed. Aishang did not stop in her tracks at all. She walked to the entrance of the courtyard and pushed open the gate. Looking at the misty dark night, she knew that there was no return when she took this step. However, she did not regret. Fei Ying panicked and instinctively wanted to rush up and stop her. However, the tightly shut door behind him suddenly opened, and a figure shuffled out behind him. Just as Aishang was about to step out of the courtyard, a wet hand pulled her back into the courtyard hard, and a slender leg directly kicked the door shut. With a clear bang, the gate was closed once again. Aishang, who was dizzy by the sudden motion, was pressed on the gate with an arm. Where are you going? A rather raspy voice sounded in Aishang's ears. Aishang looked up in surprise and saw Yi Qingtang, who was wearing only a thin garment, trapped her at the gate with an arm. The faint moonlight cast on Yi Qingtang in the hazy night. Her damp hair hung loosely at the side of her face, as drops of water fell from her hair ends. At that moment, her clear eyes were slightly narrowed as though her eyes were a galaxy, deep yet dreamy. Wuxia world. Sight the pair wondrous of eyes were fixed on the astonished Shang. Me. Miss. Shang's lips quivered as she looked at the stunning face near hers. Listen well. Yi Qingtang lowered her head a little. Her breaths brushed across the tip of Shang's nose. Suddenly, she lifted Shang's chin with her wet fingers and stared right into Shang's eyes. You are my person. I will definitely not allow you to do anything that will harm yourself. Do you hear it? Shang looked at Yi Qingtang dazed. Yi Qingtang silently pulled apart from Shang and turned to face Fei Ying, who had blanked out behind her. Watch Shang properly. If she sneaks out tonight, I will strip you naked and put you on display outside the courtyard. Fei Ying suddenly returned to his senses. Looking at Yi Qingtang, who was bathing in the moonlight, and hearing her warning, he swallowed his saliva. Miss, you're as gentle as a spring wind to Shang, but so heartless like a storm to me. You cannot favor girls and not boys. Although these thoughts ran in his head, Fei Ying still ran over and pulled Shang aside. Shang returned to her senses and was about to say something, but Yi Qingtang covered Shang's tiny mouth. If you're really worried, you and Fei Ying can just go to the ring tomorrow to watch. Shang blinked. Confusion filled her eyes as she stared at Yi Qingtang, who exuded a devilish air. Miss seems to be a little different from usual. Yi Qingtang gave Fei Ying a look, and he immediately dragged Shang away, watching over her as per Yi Qingtang's orders. Under the moonlight, Yi Qingtang looked up slightly, and she lazily stretched her body when the moonlight fell on her face. Wuxia world. Sight this cultivation method is really deadly. However, its effects were satisfying. Becoming more powerful was not to bully the weak, but to protect the people around you. Yi Qingtang looked down at her palm, and the corners of her lips tugged into an evil smile. Song Juanxiu, the few of you can just clean your necks and wait for death tomorrow. Chapter 383. Come up together 1. 10 days were over in the blink of an eye. That morning, many disciples crowded around the life and death ring. Song Juanxiu and the other 3 disciples arrived early in the morning. They stood beside the ring and chatted with other disciples. Senior brother Song, do you think Yi Qingtang really dares to come today? An onlooking disciple asked. Maybe not. Didn't you notice how she disappeared these past few days? She was nowhere to be seen even in the martial arts hall. She isn't even cultivating. What does she have to fight you all on the life and death ring with? Perhaps she has been working behind closed doors. Working behind closed doors? Haha, who does she think she is? If her cultivation level could increase by kneeling in the room, then why do we still need to enter the sect? Might as well kneel at home. Isn't that better? This group of disciples did not conceal their dislike of Yi Qingtang, with their words covertly supporting Song Juanxiu. Song Juanxiu was related to an inner sect elder, and thus, there were naturally benefits to be on his good side. Yi Qingtang was merely a disciple who just entered the inner sect and came from Lin Town, which no one had heard about. How could she be compared to Song Juanxiu? There were 2 groups of people, one who flattered the powerful and trampled on the humble, and the other who watched the bustle. Song Juanxiu listened to the discussions, and although he did not utter a word, he stuck his chin out, revealing his arrogant attitude as always. Senior brother Song, if Yi Qingtang dares to come, just leave her to us. You don't have to take the trouble to attack her, said the other 3 disciples who were Song Junkia's partners in crime. In their eyes, it was simply impossible for Yi Qingtang to win any one of them with her skills. Although Yi Qingtang did challenge the 4 of them, realistically speaking, she would probably not be able to even win against the first opponent. Song Juanxiu did not say anything. His eyes scanned the crowd, but Yi Qingtang was nowhere to be seen. The life and death ring is about to start already. Why is Yi Qingtang still not here? Could she really be scared? If she's scared, wouldn't she become a laughingstock in the inner sect from today on? She was the one who initiated the life and death ring. She was so arrogant initially, yet hiding in cowardice now. Does she still want her face? Face? Do you think she wants her face or her life? If she really entered the life and death ring, she would probably not be able to leave it alive. There was a clamor of discussions. Time passed, but Yi Qingtang was still nowhere to be seen. Then, everyone could not help but suspect if Yi Qingtang was really afraid and did not dare to meet for the challenge. Senior brother Song, do you want to send someone to take a look? One of the 3 disciples asked. Song Juanxiu waved a hand. Although he wanted to use this opportunity to kill Yi Qingtang on the life and death ring, if Yi Qingtang did not have the courage to enter the ring and admitted defeat, there was no way he could force Yi Qingtang into the ring according to the rules. It was all up to Yi Qingtang to decide whether to come or not. However, if she dared to stand up to them today, she would probably not be able to survive in the inner sect in the future. If the elders heard that Yi Qingtang broke the agreement, her future prospects would basically be gone. At that thought, Song Juanxiu could not help but sneer. The moment Yi Qingtang issued the challenge, she was destined to not have any way out. As Song Juanxiu guessed that Yi Qingtang would not appear today, there was suddenly a bustle in the crowd. 3 people walked into everyone's sight, and the person in the lead was Yi Qingtang, whom everyone had been waiting for a long time. Chapter 384. Come up together, too. Yi Qingtang, you really dared to come. When Song Juanxiu caught sight of Yi Qingtang, his lips tugged into a sneer, and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Since she was courting death, naturally, he was not going to be polite. Yi Qingtang's arrival instantly attracted everyone's attention. Yi Qingtang really dared to come for the challenge? Does she not want her life anymore? This junior sister is really bold. Under everyone's eyes, Yi Qingtang walked to stand in front of the 4 people with Enai Shang, and Fei Ying following behind her. When Enai Shang's eyes landed on the 4 of them, a suppressed hatred emerged in her eyes. Junior sister Yi, you made us wait for quite some time, said Song Juanxiu with a smile. Though his raised brows and laughing eyes were proof of the smugness and sarcasm he felt at that very moment. Sorry for making you all wait for a long time. Yi Qingtang smiled. It is about time. Do you still want to enter the life and death ring, junior sister Yi? Song Juanxiu narrowed his eyes and spoke in a louder voice. Of course. Yi Qingtang smiled faintly. Enai Shang tugged the hem of Yi Qingtang's clothes worriedly, and Yi Qingtang slowly turned around. Pinching Enai Shang's soft cheeks, she said softly, "Take a good look later." Enai Shang nodded nervously and finally released her grip. After pacifying Enai Shang, Yi Qingtang took a leap, and was the first to enter the life and death ring. Which of us do you wish to challenge first? Song Juanxiu asked. Her cold eyes glimpsed across the 4 people. Suddenly, her lips curled up, and she pointed in the direction of the 4 of them. There's no need for sequence. You all can come up together. Everyone present was taken aback immediately. What was Yi Qingtang saying? She actually wanted to go against 4 people by herself at once. Was she insane? Yi Qingtang's words stunned everyone. They had seen people who did not want their lives anymore, but not one who was so hurried to court death. All 4 of them were at a higher level than she was, and she was probably not their opponent even in a 1-to-1 match, much less 1-to-4. She must really be tired of living. Song Juanxiu similarly had a surprised expression, but he returned to normal very quickly. You wish to challenge the 4 of us at the same time? Yes, Yi Qingtang replied without hesitation. Looking at Yi Qingtang's behavior, a sarcastic look flashed across Song Juanxiu's eyes. He exchanged a look with the other 3 people and announced, "Since it is junior sister Yes' request, we can only fulfill it." Then the 4 of them entered the ring. Watching the 5 people on the life and death ring, the onlooking disciples were instantly excited. They originally thought that it was a match of which Yi Qingtang overestimated her abilities, but they did not expect it to actually develop to such a crazy state. Not mentioning anything else, just Yi Qingtang's request to challenge for people by herself at once caused many to gasp. Do you want to bet? How long can Yi Qingtang last on the ring? Some disciples joked around. At most 1/5 the time that an incense stick takes to burn. 1/5. You really think highly of her. If it was 1-to-1, perhaps she would be able to last that long. But now, she is dealing with all 4 of them. Let's not talk about the other three for now. But Song Juanxiu himself is famous for his underhand attacks. Previously, I've already heard that Song Juanxiu once caused trouble for Yi Qingtang. But she landed him into trouble instead, and he was almost boxed by Feng Moli. With this chance, do you think Song Juanxiu would let Yi Qingtang off so easily? Chapter 385. Come up together 3. There's such an incident? Of course. If I were to say, Yi Qingtang would probably just die without being able to make a second move. There was an eruption of messy discussions. Beside the ring, Fei Ying and Inai Shang's palms were sweaty from the nervousness. Everything they heard was unfavorable to Yi Qingtang. And while Yi Qingtang was set on entering the ring, they felt their hearts suspending in the air at that moment. Dear Lord, I'm begging you, please bless and protect Mississippi. Inai Shang clasped her hands near her lips and softly prayed to the heavens. On the other hand, Fei Ying narrowed his eyes and glared at Song Juanxiu and the other three on the ring. He clenched his fists quietly with an unusually baleful expression in his eyes. If Miss was really defeated, he would definitely make the four of them pay with their blood. On the ring, Song Juanxiu and the other three wore a casual expression as they scanned Yi Qingtang quietly. Senior brother Song, although Yi Qingtang overestimated her abilities, her looks are really likable. It would really be a pity for her to die on the ring. A disciple, who harbored evil designs on Inai Shang previously, had an evil thought after seeing Yi Qingtang's stunning face. Even if it's a pity, it can only be a pity. I don't wish to see her stepping out of the ring alive today, Song Juanxiu said coldly. Yi Qingtang damaged his reputation 2 consecutive times. And if he did not teach her a lesson, how was he to domineer the inner sect in the future? With Song Junqia's words, the 3 disciples naturally knew how to act. Song Juanxiu looked up and straight at Yi Qingtang with a wicked gaze. Junior sister Yi, you're so courageous today. And we will naturally not be wet blankets. On the life and death ring, it is up to fate whether one lives or dies. Take care, junior sister Yi. He quietly shot the 3 people a look, and they understood his meaning immediately. The 4 people separated out and trapped Yi Qingtang in the center of the ring from 4 corners. There was a person at all 4 corners, trapping Yi Qingtang, who was positioned in the center. Once the battle started, one could imagine how dangerous it would be when the 4 people attacked together. Song Juanxiu indeed does not intend to go easy. I think Yi Qingtang really will die here this time. Song Juanxiu even brought the glacial frost sword today. He did not intend to let Yi Qingtang off from the start. A disciple's sharp eyes noticed the sword hung on Song Junqia's waist. Glacial frost sword? Song Juanxiu brought this glacial frost sword from his family clan. It is said that the sword is very expensive, and if placed in the Xianming Pavilion, it would require 60 to 70,000 Xianming points to exchange for it. I heard that the glacial frost sword is not only extremely sharp, but was also made using frozen iron, and thus very sturdy. As long as you're injured by the glacial frost sword, the wound would be infected with ice poison immediately. Yi Qingtang is really dead this time. Song Juanxiu had a prestigious background, where his family clan possessed a strong influence. The glacial frost sword in his hands was famous as well. Although it was not a top-grade divine weapon, it was still very powerful. With the ice poison attribute, its name was recorded in the weapons register. Song Juanxiu drew out his glacial frost sword immediately, and cold air was emitted from the blade. He glanced at Yi Qingtang's sword with a belittling expression. That sheath was old and simple without any color. After taking a look, Song Juanxiu raised a brow scornfully. Junior sister Yi, draw your sword out. Chapter 386. Merely like this one. Yi Qingtang's eyes were narrowed as an evil smile played on her lips. She glanced at the 4 people, and clasped on the handle of the sword quietly with her right hand, but did not draw it out. Song Juanxiu saw that Yi Qingtang did not draw her sword out and smiled. I've heard that junior sister Yi achieved a victory in the inner sect assessment, just by the motion of drawing out a sword. It seems I can personally witness it today. The motion of drawing a sword required extreme speed, and using all of one's strength in the instant, when the sword was unsheathed. The very essence laid in the moment the sword left its sheath. That day, Yi Qingtang broke Ji Xianyuan's defense with this move. However, there was a look of sarcasm in Song Junqia's eyes. The sword in his hand was not an ordinary sword. Frozen iron was extremely strong, and ordinary weapons would definitely not be able to break it. Even if Yi Qingtang really knew how to use the motion of drawing a sword, there was no way it could break his glacial frost sword. Then, the four people exchanged a look and attacked almost at the same time. Four sharp swords aimed straight at Yi Qingtang, who was right in the center. But when the four of them struck, Yi Qingtang did not react in the way one would usually do, and instead closed her eyes and lowered her head slightly. What is she doing? The disciples below the ring were shocked to see Yi Qingtang's actions. In face of four people striking at the same time, she did not hide or avoid, and even displayed such composed posture. Wasn't she heading for doom? Anai Shang and Fei Ying were astounded as well. Seeing that the four swords were already right above Yi Qingtang's head, their hearts raced furiously. Miss, be careful. As Anai Shang cried in horror, Yi Qingtang suddenly opened her eyes. Her tiny frame moved slightly, and it was as though she turned into a stagger of countless shadows. A glint flashed across her waist, and became a whirlwind that swept all four sides. Immediately, clanks rang in the air. Song Juanxiu and the other three disciples could not see Yi Qingtang's movement at all, and could only feel pain in the palm where they held the sword. They instinctively withdrew backward. A clattering of swords sounded subsequently. What appeared before their eyes was three broken swords laid on the wide ring. What happened? The other three disciples were slightly startled, and it was only then they realized that their swords had actually broken. The tip of the swords fell near Yi Qingtang's legs. How could this be? Although their swords were not as impressive as the glacial frost sword in Song Junqia's hand, each one of them was priced above 10,000 Xianming points. They were clearly hard-earned swords, yet how could they actually be broken just like that? In the center of the ring, an insolent and evil smile appeared on Yi Qingtang's exquisite face. She lifted her chin up and glanced at the broken swords in the three disciples' hands, and then at the broken blades near her leg. Senior brothers, your swords don't seem to be so good. The three disciples' faces darkened, and they wanted to go forward instinctively, but this movement caused them to realize the piercing pain in their palm. They looked down at their palms and realized there was already a deep cut in their perlicue where their swords were held against. Gushes of blood dripped along the handle of the sword and onto the ground. How could it be? Chapter 387. Merely like this, too, shock filled their faces. Earlier on, they did not even manage to see how Yi Qingtang struck, and although they heard from Song Juanxiu that Yi Qingtang knew the profound skill of the motion of drawing a sword, they were not too bothered with it. After all, their skills overpowered Yi Qingtang's, and even if she used that move, it would definitely not be able to block one move from them. But the three people were a little dumbfounded by everything that happened. 4 people attacked and 3 swords were broken. Only Song Junqia's glacial frost sword did not have any traces of breaking. However, Song Junqia's expression was frighteningly dark at that moment. The blood that flowed out of his perlicue gradually stained the sword handle red, and there was actually a 1-finger-wide dent on the blade of the glacial frost sword that he took pride in. The glacial frost sword is damaged? How is this possible? The surrounding disciples below the ring took in the scene with their mouths hung ajar. Yi Qingtang actually used one move to break 3 weapons and damaged the glacial frost sword. How bizarre was that? Everyone's eyes landed on the unattractive sword in Yi Qingtang's hands. At that moment, the disciples realized that the ordinary-looking blade seemed to hold many stars which twinkled brightly under the scorching sun. What is the sword in Yi Qingtang's hand? How could it actually damage the glacial frost sword? I've never seen it before. Song Juanxiu narrowed his eyes. He initially thought that Yi Qingtang would die from this combined attack of 4 people. Yet unexpectedly, he embarrassed himself instead. Clutching onto the handle of the glacial frost sword, he looked at Yi Qingtang's sword and spoke coldly. Junior sister, yes, sword seems to have some background. I wonder what sword it is. Yi Qingtang's lips curled into a seeming smile. Demonic blood sword. Demonic blood sword? Song Juanxiu frowned slightly. He had heard of the demonic blood sword before. It was a pretty good sword that was extremely sharp, and it emitted a demonic air. However, in terms of strength, it was completely incomparable to the glacial frost sword. If the two swords clashed head-on, the broken sword would definitely be the demonic blood sword. However, currently, his glacial frost sword was the one that was chipped off. Song Juanxiu felt that there was something odd about Yi Qingtang's demonic blood sword. They underestimated her previously, and did not expect Yi Qingtang to have such a good sword. However, they would not give Yi Qingtang a chance again. Your sword is pretty good, but to win the ring, you can't rely solely on a good sword, Song Juanxiu said coldly. He exchanged a look with the other three people, and immediately charged towards Yi Qingtang with the sword. This time, only Song Juanxiu attacked while the other three stood aside without moving. A scoff flashed across Yi Qingtang's eyes, and her sneer deepened as Song Juanxiu came nearer. In just a moment, Song Juanxiu and Yi Qingtang were in a tussle, and their combined breaths were like a whirlwind that caused turbulence the surrounding air. Song Juanxiu was currently stage 3 of the first heaven. His attacks were violent, and he had frightening strength. He knew that there was something strange about Yi Qingtang's demonic blood sword, and thus simply did not intend to fight with her using swords. Directly closing their distance without giving Yi Qingtang a chance to escape, he directed energy into his palm, and crashed his palm towards her forehead. Yi Qingtang dodged swiftly and avoided Song Junqia's slap. Chapter 388. Merely like this 3. The wind from Song Junqia's palm attacked past Yi Qingtang, and crashed on the edge of the ring. With a loud boom, the sturdy ring was shattered by the wind of his attack, kicking up a storm of dust. If his palm landed on Yi Qingtang, her internal organs, and even bones would probably be crushed. Song Juanxiu fought with Yi Qingtang continuously. Vicious expressions appeared in the eyes of the 3 disciples, who stood at 3 different locations. Then, with full concentration, they directed their energy, and a rush of spirit energy spread around them, forming into the shape of 3 huge dragons in midair. Immediately, the 3 people attacked at the same instant, and the 3 huge dragons in the sky crashed straight into the center of the ring. Song Juanxiu took notice of the rapidly descending illusory dragons from the corner of his eye. He sneered and immediately withdrew backward. "Junior sister Yi, take care," Song Juanxiu scoffed, and was already a few steps away from Yi Qingtang the instant the 3 huge dragons were about to crash on her. A rumble suddenly boomed in the air. Under the impact of the huge force, the entire ring was smashed into pieces. As spiderweb-like cracks spread all over the ring and clouds of dust were stirred up, dragon roars sounded one after another. The dust obstructed everyone's vision. Illusion of the dragon's breath? Are Song Juanxiu and the rest crazy? The onlooking disciples were astonished by the 3 illusory dragons. This was one of the inner sex cultivation techniques, and was extremely lethal. No one expected that they would actually use such a move on Yi Qingtang. Exactly how much does Song Juanxiu want to kill Yi Qingtang? As dust flew around the place, a vicious glint twinkled in Song Junqia's eyes. The 3 disciples had already walked to his side, and the 4 partners in crime watched the dusty haze before them. "Senior brother Song, Yi Qingtang is really dead this time," a disciple said with a laugh. Song Juanxiu replied, "Since this is what she chose, she can't blame anyone. The winner is set. We can leave already." The 3 disciples nodded slightly. The combined attack of 3 disciples, who were at stage 2 of the first heaven, definitely was not what Yi Qingtang, who was at stage 1 of the first heaven, could block. They were certain that Yi Qingtang would die without a doubt, and immediately prepared to leave the ring with Song Juanxiu. When they reached the edge of the ring, the 3 sharp-eyed disciples saw In Aishang, who blinked out below the ring with tears in her eyes. "Little beauty, I'm afraid your miss is dead this time. What is the point of doing this? If only you obediently submitted to us, you would not cause her to have such an ending. She is already dead now, and no one will be able to protect you anymore." Chapter 389. Receive Your Death. 1. Alarmed, Song Juanxiu and the rest turned around instinctively. What appeared before them was a black shadow that suddenly flew out from the dust at such a rapid speed that they could not react in time. The black shadow was like a force of evil. Accompanied by a cold glint, the shadow directly scurried to the side of those three disciples. Before the three people could take a good look at the opposing party's face, a sharp pain spread from their throats. They wiped the spot instinctively, but touched a warm liquid. Before they returned to their senses, scarlet blood immediately spattered out from the cut on their throats and showered everywhere like a blood rain. Everything happened merely in the blink of an eye. It was utter silence. A fair hand silently plucked out the demonic blood sword that was stuck on the edge of the ring. Against the splattering blood, Yi Qingtang's devilish smile entered everyone's eyes. With 3 thuds, the 3 disciples whose necks were slit collapsed on the ground. They held on the cut on their necks tightly, but blood never stopped flowing no matter how they tried to stop it. Yi Qingtang swept a look across the 3 bastards with laughter in her eyes. When she caught sight of Anaishang and Fei Ying, she could not help but smile. "What are you crying for? Am I not well and alive?" Yi Qingtang looked at Anaishang, whose face was full of tear stains, and threw a handkerchief over. "Wipe your tears away. Watch how these 3 people die." Anaishang frantically caught the handkerchief and widened her eyes. Surprise and elation filled her eyes when she saw Yi Qingtang standing in the ring. "Miss is all right. Miss is really all right." Yi Qingtang turned around and looked at Song Juanxiu, the only one out of the 4 who was still standing on the ring. At that moment, Song Junqia's face was already covered in blood splatters. Below the blood, there was nothing but shock in his sinister eyes. Why didn't you die?" Song Juanxiu looked at Yi Qingtang in disbelief, completely unable to believe that Yi Qingtang was not at all injured from 3 attacks of the illusory of the dragon's breath. "Die?" Yi Qingtang raised a brow, and her smile deepened. "How can 3 people at a mere stage 2 of the first heaven be able to injure me?" "What do you mean?" Uneasiness suddenly crept up in Song Junqia's heart. 3 people at a mere stage 2 of the first heaven? How could Yi Qingtang say this? She was clearly only at stage 1 of the first heaven. Yi Qingtang did not reply to Song Juanxiu, and only looked down as she wiped the blood off the demonic blood sword. Without even lifting an eye, she uttered emotionlessly, "I originally intended to play with you all for a while more, but you all dared to touch my person and courted death yourselves. I'm afraid I don't have that good of a temper to allow you all to live any longer." Terror filled Song Juanxiu. The instant Yi Qingtang finished her sentence, she suddenly struck. Her method of attack was completely different this time. In a split second, the demonic blood sword was already blanketed in a scarlet sword aura. In just a moment's time, there was a reverse in the offense and defense. Song Juanxiu lifted his sword in a flurry in an attempt to block Yi Qingtang's attack. The 2 swords clashed loudly. Sparks flew. Nervousness was nowhere to be seen on Yi Qingtang's face, which only had a smile blooming on her lips. On the other hand, Song Junqia's forehead was already covered with sweat, and the arm that held the sword was already numb from the impact. Warden Song turned around at the sound, and was astonished to see Song Juanxiu fleeing from the ring in a panic. What was going on? Previously, he did hear Song Juanxiu mention that he was going to enter the ring with a disciple who just entered the inner sect. Since the opponent was only at stage 1 of the first heaven, he was not concerned, yet unexpectedly, such a scene would actually play out before him. As Song Juanxiu called Warden Song for help, a glint shot straight towards him. Song Juanxiu was only 1 step away from leaving the ring, yet this 1 step could not be crossed no matter how. The demonic blood sword already pierced through his shoulder and locked him right on the pillar at the edge of the ring. Chapter 391. Receive Your Death 3. Senior Brother Song. The life and death ring hasn't ended. Where do you wish to go? There was a hint of laughter in Yi Qingtang's voice, which sounded behind Song Juanxiu. He only heard it, but it was enough for him to almost break down in fear. "Warden Song, save me! Save me!" Song Juanxiu pleaded for help to Warden Song, who who was walking over with great strides. Warden Song looked just over 40, and there were some similarities between his face and Song Junkius. He was related to Song Junkius family clan by blood, and was ordered by the family clan to look after Song Juanxiu in Xianling sect. Song Juanxiu relied on Warden Song's care, and committed many wrongdoings in the inner sect. Yi Qingtang walked to the back of Song Juanxiu. She grabbed his hair with a hand, forcing him to lift his head, while her other hand held on the black dagger and pressed it on his neck. Just as Yi Qingtang was about to slit Song Junkius' neck, Warden Song had already walked to the ring. Stop! Upon seeing Song Junkius' wretched state, Warden Song was startled and shouted immediately. Yi Qingtang's hand that held the dagger paused as she looked at Warden Song. Do you have any instructions, Warden? Warden Song's brows furrowed slightly. What are you all doing? Life and death ring. Don't you know it, Warden? Senior brother Song and I entered the life and death ring, where death is determined by destiny, isn't it? Yi Qingtang said with a laugh. In Yi Qingtang's hands, Song Junkius' face was ash-white as he trembled in fear and continuously pleaded for help from Warden Song. Warden Song's expression was rather ugly. Song Juanxiu was the eldest son of the Song family, and the family master had ordered him to look after Song Juanxiu. If Song Juanxiu died right before his eyes, he would be in a difficult position. You've already won the life and death ring. You are all disciples of the same sect, and should be lenient wherever possible, Warden Song said coldly. The group of disciples who were exhilarated from spectating was shocked when they heard Warden Song. The rules of the life and death ring were rules, but the relationship between Song Juanxiu and Warden Song had long circulated in the inner sect. Now that Warden Song told Yi Qingtang to release Song Juanxiu, if Yi Qingtang was still bent on taking Song Junkius' life, wouldn't it be a slap to Warden Song's face in public? Song Juanxiu was already completely frightened anyway, so why not give Warden Song face instead? Perhaps she would have some benefits in the future. Moreover, it was believed that no disciple in the inner sect was willing to offend a warden. Yi Qingtang was not hurried to reply. With a smile, she looked at Warden Song's stern face, and then at Song Juanxiu, who was quivering in fear. Then, she released her grasp on Song Junkius' hair and kept the dagger. Song Juanxiu heaved a huge sigh of relief. With Warden Song here now as his backing, he was not that terrified anymore, and his hatred towards Yi Qingtang arose again. This hatred would never be appeased if he did not kill Yi Qingtang. The disciples understood Yi Qingtang's wise action. If it were them, they would naturally not offend a warden over the grievance of an attendant girl. However, just as everyone thought Song Juanxiu was safe and sound, Yi Qingtang's eyes suddenly sharpened, and the dagger that she just kept was violently stabbed into the left side of his back. The dagger penetrated through the flesh in an instant, and pierced right into his heart. Never had Song Juanxiu expected that Yi Qingtang would actually attack him again. He widened his terror-filled eyes under the excruciating pain, and before he could struggle, his breathing stopped. Chapter 392. Receive your death for. Warden Song stared at Song Juanxiu, who stopped breathing unbelievably. He raised his head, and his eyes met with Yi Qingtang's smiling eyes. You! Yi Qingtang smiled, and pulled out the dagger that pierced through Song Junkius' heart. Blood spurted out onto her face, but her smile remained. Warden Song, the rules of the life and death ring are set by the sect master. I didn't violate any of them, right? Warden Song's face was extremely unpleasant. Based on the rules, Yi Qingtang did not violate the rules at all. Even though she killed Song Juanxiu in front of his eyes, it was still obeying the rules. If he purposely targeted Yi Qingtang on that, he would be the one who violated the rules. Yi Qingtang scanned through Warden Song's face and pulled out the demonic blood sword in Song Junkius' shoulder. She wiped off the blood on the dagger and the sword, and then jumped off the ring. Song Juanxiu had to be killed today. Even if she ignored the resentment between them and let go of him in front of Warden Song, Song Juanxiu would never give up. He would definitely ask Warden Song to help him take revenge. Since the possibility existed, she had to kill him first to prevent further troubles. There were only 4 lifeless bodies left on the life and death ring, lying in the pool of blood. The disciples who watched the whole fight were all stunned. They could never even dream about the results today. Song Juanxiu and the three people's combined attack could not fend off Yi Qingtang alone. The four people who were so confident of their victory had finished their last breath. The way everyone looked at Yi Qingtang had changed. Yi Qingtang's ability must have reached the second heaven to be able to suppress Song Juanxiu, who was at stage 3 of the first heaven. She had just entered the sect for only a month. Where did this girl come from? Rumors said that she only possessed a red spirit root. Where else in the world would there be such an insane red spirit root? Yi Qingtang walked to Naishang and Fei Ying. She looked at how the two little guys were stunned, and she squeezed Naishang's chubby face. People who bullied you have all died. Are you relieved now? Her voice was warm and caring. Naishang then realized the situation. The tears in her eyes finally flowed out as she saw Yi Qingtang standing in front her safely. She cried out and hugged Yi Qingtang, and her hands held Yi Qingtang's waist tightly. No one would know how worried she was during the whole process. She was really scared that Yi Qingtang would get hurt because of her. Yi Qingtang sighed as she looked at Naishang, who was crying in front of her. She gently patted her back and called Fei Ying to follow up. The three of them left the place under everyone's gaze. The smell of blood spread out from the life and death ring. Now that the fight had ended, the disciples also dispersed with their frightened minds. The fight today made Yi Qingtang's name famous in the inner sect. How insane was it for her to reach the second heaven of martial qi level 1 in a month from Khanate level 9? As the crowd dispersed, Warden Song stood beside the ring alone. His eyes were fierce as he stared at Song Juanxiu, who was lying on the ring. He raised his head slowly and looked towards Yi Qingtang's direction. His eyes were full of unpleasantness and danger. Chapter 393. Give a try 1. Before Yi Qingtang entered her yard, Ji Xianyuan walked over in a serious face. Junior sister Yi. Ji Xianyuan looked at Yi Qingtang and said, Yes, senior brother Ji. Yi Qingtang answered, I heard about the challenge between you and 4 people on the life and death ring. I wanted to persuade you, but surprisingly you won. I shall congratulate you on your victory, Ji Xianyuan said. Yi Qingtang smiled and nodded. She heard from Fei Ying that Ji Xianyuan visited her a few times during her seclusion period. It seemed that he wanted to persuade her to not go on to the life and death ring. But now that the challenge had ended, the persuasion would be meaningless. Thank you, senior brother Ji. Ji Xianyuan forced a smile and said, I witnessed the challenge today. Your improvement was indeed amazing. I admitted the fact that I lost to you the other day, but the truth showed me that I still looked down on your ability. If the fight between us happened today, I think I can only avoid at most 3 attacks from you. Ji Xianyuan was quite talented. He was diligent in cultivation and remained focused all the time. He entered the inner sect with Yi Qingtang together, and he had reached the first stage of the first heaven, about to break through to the second stage. His improvement was huge, but it was incomparable to Yi Qingtang, who had entered the second heaven of the martial qi level 1. Junior sister Yi, I have to say that though you are very talented, you should not have killed Song Juanxiu just now. Ji Xianyuan suddenly changed his focus. Oh, why is that so? Yi Qingtang asked. Ji Xianyuan scanned through the surroundings to make sure there was no one around. His death is not important, but he has some connections with Warden Song. Warden Song has worked in the inner sect for years. He is always very decisive and fierce, and is valued by Elder Lin of the Sword Fraction. Today, Warden Song asked you in front of everyone to not kill Song Juanxiu, but you still killed him in the end. Though you did not break any of the sect's rules, you provoked Warden Song. I'm afraid that this is not very appropriate, Ji Xianyuan said softly. Ji Xianyuan really believed in Yi Qingtang's talent, and that was why he bothered to remind her. Yi Qingtang's face remained unchanged, but when she heard the name Elder Lin, coldness appeared in her eyes. The person she resented the most in the Xianling sect in her previous life was Elder Lin of the Sword Faction. In her previous life, when her heart of the demon god was exposed, even the sect master did not leak out the news, as he valued the sect bond with her. He gave a private command to ask her to leave the Xianling sect. However, Elder Lin knew the news and wanted to assassinate her secretly after she left the sect. If Yin Shu had not sacrificed himself for her, she would have been ripped apart by Elder Lin for her heart. This time, she entered the Xianling sect again for the Black Heaven water in the mystic realm. The happenings between her and Elder Lin still remained in her heart. She would never forget the scene when Elder Lin smashed Yin Shu's head in front of her. Under the pouring of rain, the only person who treated her nicely died in front of her eyes. Yi Qingtang squinted her eyes and kept her thoughts. She pretended to be casual and smiled at Ji Xianyuan. Thank you for your concern, senior brother Ji. I'm just a normal disciple. I think Warden Song will not purposely make things difficult for me. Ji Xianyuan could only sigh as he saw how casual Yi Qingtang was. He reminded her to be more cautious, and left without saying anything else. Chapter 394. Give a try, 2. Yi Qingtang could finally take a break after the challenge of life and death ring. However, the disappearance of the silver wolf made her speechless. There was no sign of the silver wolf coming back even after a few days, and Yi Qingtang had a weird feeling. It seemed like the silver wolf would not come back this time. Yi Qingtang felt dismayed by the feeling. She could not help but sigh as she stared at the little lightning dragon in her hand. She still decided to try her luck, to look for her silver wolf in the inner sect. The in charge of the sword spirit workshop was sitting outside, and smoking an opium pipe. His eyes sparkled as he saw Yi Qingtang walking over. He immediately went over. Little girl Yi Qingtang, who did not see any trace of the silver wolf, was feeling a little upset. She turned her head instantly when she heard someone calling her, and saw the in charge of the sword spirit workshop walking towards her. Yi Qingtang was shocked. That day, she used the black gold meteorite iron by luck. Did the in-charge realize his loss and decide to find trouble? Little girl, I haven't seen you for days at the sword spirit workshop. There was a rare smile on the in-charge's old face. Yi Qingtang stared the in-charge peculiarly. His attitude was weird today. This guy was always very arrogant. How come today he was so kind to her? Did he not come to ask her to return the dagger? Little girl, I'm so glad to meet you today. We're forging a longsword now. Since you are so interested in forging, join me to take a look? The in-charge smiled and asked, but he did not reveal his inner thoughts. The in-charge always wanted to meet Yi Qingtang again, after witnessing her forging ability previously. However, it was not appropriate for him, as an in-charge of the sword spirit workshop, to look for an inner sect disciple. Today he finally met her by chance. How could he just let her go? Yi Qingtang was confused by the invitation. Before she could figure out anything, she was dragged into the sword spirit workshop by the in-charge. The temperature in the workshop was high. A few blacksmiths were standing around a huge forging table and discussing something. The temperature that the cold iron needs is too high. If we add cold water, the difference in temperature may break the sword. I don't support in doing so. The thickness of the sword is too small. If we do not reduce the temperature on time, the shape will differ. Then all our previous effort will be wasted. We can't take the risk. Anyway, I don't agree with the usual ways to cool down the sword. The blacksmiths were arguing constantly. They did not even realize that the in-charge brought Yi Qingtang over. Yi Qingtang scanned through the furnace beside the forging table. There was a half-forged sword toasting in the fire. The shape of the sword had been formed, and the edge of the sword was extremely thin. The shadow of the flame could be seen through the edge, though it was burning in the flame. What is this? Yi Qingtang asked the in-charge curiously. The in-charge explained, this is the broken ice sword that we forged using these few days. It uses 1,000-year-old cold iron as the material. The body of the sword is very thin, and the edge is even thinner. Yi Qingtang felt a little surprised. She did not visit the sword spirit workshop before in her previous life. She only heard that the blacksmiths inside had very high standards. However, the half-forged broken ice sword showed the skills of the blacksmiths. Chapter 395. Give a try 3. The 1,000-year cold iron was very rare and precious. This kind of iron originated from extremely cold places, and it carried low temperature by itself. It would require a very high temperature to melt. Thus, the control of the temperature must be very accurate. Any mistake would damage the coldness of the cold iron itself. The body of the remnant ice sword is extremely thin. It's a problem for us now to cool it down and forge its shape. If we place it into ice water for immediate cooling, the sudden change of temperature may break the sword. If we cool it down slowly, the shape of the sword body may be altered during the process. The in-charge had a very bad headache thinking about the problem. The shape of the remnant ice sword had been forged earlier on. However, they could not find a way to cool it down as the body was too thin. They had dragged on for a few days now. If they continued dragging on, the special property of the ice iron might be damaged. The body of the sword was so thin that it was extremely difficult to forge. Even the same batch of blacksmiths also could not guarantee that they could forge another one. Little girl, what do you think? What's the best way to cool down the remnant ice sword? The in-charge asked Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang did not reply immediately. The in-charge's question caught the blacksmith's attention. They turned their head to find out the person whom the in-charge asked. They thought that the person must be a senior blacksmith, but they saw a 15-year-old girl standing in front of them. Their faces changed immediately. How much forging knowledge could a young girl know? They only treated it as a random question and returned to their discussion. Yi Qingtang stared at the remnant ice sword for a while and said slowly, "Cold water may break it. Hot water may alter its shape. I think the frost condensate water may work." Frost condensate water? The in-charge was stunned for a moment. The frost condensate water could not be considered as water by its properties. It was more like a thick liquid with strong adherence. It was ductile with a low temperature and could bear with high heat. It was usually used to fill in the boxing gloves temporarily under high temperatures, as it would not evaporate. However, he had never heard of using it to cool down weapons. The in-charge hesitated. Yi Qingtang's words caught the blacksmith's attention again. They looked towards Yi Qingtang, and their eyes were full of disagreement. "Little girl, don't talk when you don't understand. How can the frost condensate water be used to cool down weapons? Are you joking?" One of the blacksmiths said unpleasantly. Though the frost condensate water would not evaporate, its conductivity was strong. Its own temperature would increase when it was in contact with hot objects. It could not maintain a low temperature for cooling down. The blacksmiths only treated her as a young girl who did not know anything, and her suggestion was like a joke to them. Yi Qingtang shrugged her shoulder and did not say anything. The remnant ice sword was not hers. She was just answering the in-charge's question. The remnant ice sword must be cooled down today, and no one found an appropriate method until now. The in-charge looked at Yi Qingtang and said, "Little girl, how confident are you if I ask you to take over the task?" Chapter 396, Give a Try For. The blacksmiths were stunned when they heard what the in-charge just said. Was the in-charge mad? He wanted a young girl to take over the task of forging the remnant ice sword? Yi Qingtang was also shocked by his request. "Little girl, I know that you are talented in forging. To be honest, the remnant ice sword is required by Elder Mo of the internal inner sect. If you can help us with it, as the in-charge of the Sword Spirit Workshop, I can promise you that the price of anything you want to forge in the future will reduce by 10 times. Yi Qingtang was not interested at first, but her eyes sparkled once she heard the words, reduce by 10 times. The price of forging in the Sword Spirit Workshop was extremely high. If the price could be reduced by 10 times, Yi Qingtang was suddenly interested. She had not visited the Sword Spirit Workshop again, as she did not have enough Xianming points, and the price was too high to be affordable for her. Reduced by 10 times. In the future, she would only need to spend a few hundred Xianming points when she came for forging. The difference between a few hundred and a few thousand was insane. I'm not entirely confident, but if you need, I'll try. Yi Qingtang did not dare to promise, but she used the frost condensate water for cooling down before in her previous life. How dare you to try when you are not even confident? The blacksmiths were very dissatisfied. The in-charge stared at them before they could finish their words and said to Yi Qingtang, "We don't have other methods now. Just try. At least it's better to wait for the sword to be damaged." "In charge, you can't let her try." "Okay means it's okay. Do you have other ways?" The in-charge said coldly. The blacksmiths shut their mouths. They would not have discussed for so long if they had other ways. "Are you sure?" Yi Qingtang asked again. The in-charge immediately asked people to bring over a few buckets of frost condensate water to show his attitude. "Okay, then I'll give a try." Yi Qingtang rolled up her sleeves and walked to the forging table. The blacksmiths stared at her fiercely. Yi Qingtang did not bother with them, as she only thought of her 10 times discount. "Please bring me some ice over," Yi Qingtang asked. "Why do you need ice for?" The in-charge was curious. Yi Qingtang smiled and said, "You'll see later." The in-charge commanded people to bring ice over. Both the frost condensate water and the ice were ready. Yi Qingtang placed the red remnant ice sword into the frost condensate water. The thick frost condensate water immediately surrounded the sword, but it did not evaporate. However, the sword was still hot, and there was no sign of cooling down. Like I said, how can the frost condensate water cool down the sword? The blacksmith sneered. The in-charge also frowned and became skeptical. Yi Qingtang did not care about their discussion. She put a large amount of ice on the frost condensate water, as the sword was surrounded completely by the frost condensate water. The frost condensate water was extremely hot now due to conduction, and so the ice place melted immediately and turned into water vapor. Chapter 397. Think highly of you 1. Yi Qingtang continued to add ice cubes, and a strange scene played out before everyone's eyes. The temperature of the frost condensate dropped rapidly, and this heat loss was directly conducted to the remnant ice sword. As Yi Qingtang added ice cubes continuously, the redness of the remnant ice sword gradually faded. The in-charge widened his eyes. There's still such a move? Frost condensate was easily affected by the surrounding temperature, but would not melt under high heat due to its special texture. When glued tightly on the remnant ice sword, it stably took the shape of the remnant ice sword, while the continuous addition of ice cubes would cause the temperature of the frost condensate to become extremely low. Then this was directly used to cool the remnant ice sword. The few blacksmiths who looked down on Yi Qingtang previously were dumbfounded. Never had they expected there to be such a use for the frost condensate. Not only could this ensure that the remnant ice sword was not deformed, but it could also cool it gradually without breaking it. It was truly a flawless and perfect method. The few buckets of ice cubes were completely used up, and the remnant ice sword was completely cooled. Yi Qingtang touched the sword handle carefully. After realizing that it was icy cold, she stopped her actions and removed the remnant ice sword from the frozen condensate. It seems that it should be fine now. Yi Qingtang beamed as she looked at the remnant ice sword in her hand. She had to say that this sword was pretty good. After looking at it for a while, she handed it to the in-charge. The in-charge looked at the remnant ice sword in his hands with shock written in his eyes. He only lifted his head up quite some time later, as he looked at Yi Qingtang with eyes full of praises. This girl did not just have amazing forging techniques, but even her skills were so dynamic. She was indeed so promising. The blacksmiths who grumbled about Yi Qingtang previously became mutes completely. Thinking back about their prior suspicions now, it was a burn on their faces. "Thank you." The in-charge came back to his senses and said earnestly, "If there's a need in the future, you can proceed according to my promise earlier in the Sword Spirit Workshop." Yi Qingtang nodded. This was what she wanted. The in-charge was speaking to Yi Qingtang. But in the secret chamber in the Sword Spirit Workshop, there were 2 figures standing quietly. Through a small window in the secret chamber, the elderly who witnessed Yi Qingtang forging a dagger watched Yi Qingtang, and then turned slightly to look at the person beside him. "Elder Mo, what do you think of this girl?" There were traces of a smile in the elderly's tone. The person in the secret chamber with the elderly was the Internal Affairs Elder, Elder Mo. He was here for the remnant ice sword today, but was dragged into the secret chamber by the elderly before the in-charge brought Yi Qingtang into the sword spirit workshop. The entire process where Yi Qingtang used the frost condensate to forge the item fell into his eyes. This is the Yi Qingtang whom you mentioned about previously? Elder Mo said respectfully. The elderly nodded as he touched his mustache. There was a smile in his eyes. That's right. This girl is young, but her forging skills are amazing. Even old Duan is full of praises towards her. Accepting such a pupil will not be a loss to you. The old Duan whom the elderly said was the in-charge of the sword spirit workshop. There was hesitation on Elder Mo's face. The elderly chuckled after noting the hesitation on Elder Mo's face. You're so devoted in cultivation, and naturally, you know the importance of weapons. If I don't remember wrongly, there are quite a few damaged weapons in your weapon chamber, aren't there? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.